Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of What If Naruto was in Code Geass. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Following the end of Prince Clovis' funeral, the members of the student council made their way back to the club room. Naruto was the last one in. The moment he stepped through the door, he pulled out his phone and moved a little off to the side near one of the windows. Yeah, I know, Naruto said into the phone, his voice lower than usual. I heard everything he said. There was a pause as Minato answered him from the other end. No, I'm not angry because he took a shot at the company, Naruto replied, eyes narrowing slightly. I'm angry because he took a shot at you. That got Mito's attention immediately. She had just stepped into the room behind him, and though she said nothing, her gaze shifted toward her brother at once. A second later, she walked further in and quietly took a seat near the table. Naruto listened for another moment before sighing through his nose. Yeah, I know, he muttered. I'll start getting things in place from my side too. Another pause. Alright. Keep me updated. He ended the call and lowered the phone slowly before opening his laptop and setting it down on the table. Hey Naruto, Rivals asked, watching him curiously. What are you doing? Naruto glanced up. Running damage control. Rivals blinked. Damage control. Because of what the Emperor said. Millie asked, already having a good idea where this was going. Naruto nodded once. Shirley looked between the two blondes in confusion. I don't get it. What does what the Emperor said have to do with anything? Naruto tapped one finger against the table and answered while pulling up a few files on his laptop. Companies like the Namikaze Corporation depend a lot on public opinion, he said. Bad publicity, faulty products, anything that makes people lose faith in us, that all affects business. If enough people start doubting the company, then they stop buying what we make and we lose revenue. He looked up then, his expression flattening a little. And after that comment about my dad, Naruto said, there are definitely going to be people looking for a chance to use it against us. Mito, who had been quiet until then, folded her arms and gave a small nod. He was taking a swipe at Dad more than the company, she said. That alone is enough to get ready for whatever comes our way. Naruto looked at her and nodded back once. Exactly. Shirley frowned. You really think it could get that bad? Hopefully not, Naruto replied. But I'd rather be ready and not need it than the other way around. Lelouch took a seat across from him, watching him with quiet interest. What do you have planned? Naruto shrugged. Promotions. Reduced prices on some products. Sponsoring events. He glanced back at his screen. Maybe use some of the company's newer stuff as prizes. I have the perfect idea, Millie declared, clapping her hands together. Everyone turned toward her. We should hold a ball here at the school. There was a short silence before Rivals finally asked what everyone else was clearly thinking. What are you talking about, Madam President? Millie let out a huff, annoyed that no one else seemed to immediately understand her genius. Isn't it obvious? She asked. If we hold a ball and the Namikaze Corporation supplies some of its products as prizes, then the whole school will have something else to talk about besides today. She spread her hands dramatically. And if word gets back to some of the more prominent parents, even better. Someday their kids are going to inherit those connections, and you want them thinking well of your company. Naruto looked at her for a second. Then he chuckled. That plan is way too devious. Millie smiled proudly. Thank you. But aren't we already planning a party to welcome Arthur as a mascot into the student council? Nina asked softly. And, is there even enough money left in the budget for a ball? The party is for us, Millie said, waving that concern away. The ball would be for the whole school. And with everyone still thinking about Clovis, Zero, and Madara, I think the academy could use something to take its mind off all of that. Then she looked expectantly at Naruto. As for the budget, Naruto leaned back slightly. There isn't enough left for anything extravagant, he admitted, and Millie visibly deflated. Then his grin returned. Luckily, I heard a very reliable rumor that Namikaze Corporation might be looking to sponsor an event. I am sure my dad will approve it. Millie brightened instantly. Then it's settled. We're holding a ball. Wait, Just like that? Shirley asked in disbelief. Do the rest of us at least get a say? Millie gave her a sly look. Oh. I thought you'd be all for it. It might give you an excuse to ask a certain someone to go with you. Shirley's face turned pink immediately. Madam President. Millie laughed. Fine, fine. We'll vote. All in favor. You already know I'm in, Naruto said at once. Mito gave a small shrug. It makes sense. In a weird Millie way. Then Millie's eyes shifted around the room with far too much interest. And who knows, she added sweetly, maybe this ball will be good for more than one date. At that, Mito's eyes flicked, just for a second, toward Suzaku before she looked away again like nothing had happened. Naruto noticed. He said absolutely nothing. I guess if there really isn't a problem with it, then I'm okay with it, Shirley said bashfully. It does sound interesting, Nina added. You know I'm always with you, Madam President, Rivals said, giving Millie a thumbs up. I'll even help supply the drinks. It better not be anything alcoholic, Rivals, Shirley said immediately, still remembering the champagne disaster from the other day. Like any of us could stop you even if we tried, Lelouch remarked dryly, and Millie stuck her tongue out at him. Suzaku smiled a little uncertainly. I've never been to a ball before, but it sounds fun, so, sure. Sounds fine, Colin said when everyone looked to her. Really, she couldn't have cared less about Clovis, and a school ball was not usually the kind of thing she would get excited over. Still, her eyes drifted toward Naruto for the briefest moment before she looked away. Good, Millie said, already getting excited again. Then we can start planning now. If everything goes well, we can probably hold it in a few weeks. There she goes again, Rivals said with a chuckle before turning toward Naruto. You know, all this talk about Namikaze Corporation made me curious about something. Naruto raised a brow. Oh. What the inside of the place actually looks like, Rivals said. I mean, come on. It's the place behind half the most advanced stuff in the world right now. A tour. Naruto repeated, genuinely surprised. Actually, Lelouch said, that does sound interesting. I'd like to see it too, Nina added, a little more eagerly than before. The others all looked varying degrees of interested as well. Naruto scratched his cheek. I've honestly never thought about giving tours, he admitted. Most people only ever go there for business. Then he glanced around the room. But with classes cut short today, we could go now if everyone's free. I just need to let Nunnally and Sayoko know I'm going out, Lelouch said. That's fine, Naruto replied. It'll take me a few minutes to get transportation arranged anyway and let my mom know we are coming. He made a quick call. A little while later, everyone was outside the clubhouse when a large car pulled up, big enough to fit the group. Naruto stood beside a orange and black motorcycle that he sometimes decides to ride, much to the chagrin of his mother and Mito. This car will take everyone to Namikaze Corporation and then bring you all back after, he said. Then he pulled out a second helmet. Anyone want to ride with me? I will. Millie announced immediately. Before anyone else could even answer, she snatched the helmet, put it on, and climbed onto the bike behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist with zero shame. Naruto's face went a little pink. Millie. Nope, she chirped. Naruto let out a tired groan. Mito looked away, very clearly trying not to laugh. Colin, meanwhile, looked like she was suddenly reconsidering several life choices. Naruto started the motorcycle. Well, he said, doing his best to ignore Millie completely, see you there. Then he took off. Colin watched them go longer than she meant to. The irritation rising in her chest made absolutely no sense, and she knew that. Naruto was just her friend. So there was no reason whatsoever for her to feel annoyed at the way Millie was hanging all over him. Unfortunately, that thought did nothing to make the feeling go away. I guess we should get going, Suzaku said, sounding a little too amused for Colin's liking. One by one, the rest of them got into the car and headed for Namikaze Corporation. Kushina looked noticeably more cheerful as she stepped into Minato's office. Naruto's on his way, she said, unable to keep the little note of satisfaction out of her voice. And it sounds like he's bringing Suzaku, Lelouch, and the rest of the student council along for a tour. Minato looked up from his desk, thoughtful at once. That's good, he said after a moment. His gaze shifted briefly, like his thoughts were already moving ahead of the moment. At the very least, it gives us a chance to see how things are going with Suzaku. And as well as Lelouch. Kushina nodded, then crossed her arms lightly. And it might do Suzaku some good too, she added. Being around people that know him instead of soldiers and politicians for a change. Though it is too bad that Lelouch is not bringing Nana, oh I haven't seen her in a while. Minato hummed quietly in agreement. It would be good to see how they are both doing. He said. And while they're here, his eyes narrowed just slightly with thought. I can probably pull Naruto aside for a bit. Kushina raised a brow. To show him the Izanagi. Minato gave a small nod. If I'm going to put that machine in his hands eventually, he said, then I'd rather he see it now than have it thrown at him later without context. Kushina's expression softened, though concern still lingered beneath it. You really think he's ready for that? Minato leaned back slightly in his chair. Ready? He repeated. Probably not. That made Kushina sigh. But, Minato continued, Naruto hasn't exactly been waiting for our permission to throw himself into danger. That was true enough that Kushina couldn't argue with it. Instead, she glanced toward the door. Well, she said, you should probably get ready then. Because since that Millie girl is coming too, there's a good chance half this place is about to become a circus. That got the faintest smile out of Minato. Then I suppose we should try to look prepared before the chaos gets here. Elsewhere in the Tokyo settlement, Cornelia sat within her office in the government building, working through a stack of reports with the same cold efficiency she brought to everything else. Guilford and Darlton stood nearby, assisting her in silence as she signed off on one document after another. Then a soft knock sounded at the door. Enter, Cornelia said without looking up. The door opened, and Euphemia stepped inside wearing a light violet and white dress that suited her far more than the rigid atmosphere of the office did. She closed the door carefully behind her before turning back toward her sister. You wished to speak with me, Viceroy? Euphemia asked, doing her best to remember Cornelia's insistence on formality. Cornelia set one paper aside and finally looked up. Yes, Sub-Viceroy Euphemia. I wanted to inform you of the results of my meeting with Minato Namikaze, and of the decision I have reached regarding your wish to work alongside Naruto and support the reconstruction effort. Though Guilford and Darlton kept their attention dutifully on their work, both men were clearly listening. Euphemia clasped her hands in front of her, trying not to show how anxious she suddenly felt. And what decision have you made? Cornelia was quiet for a moment before answering. I will admit, she said, my meeting with Minato Namikaze was not what I expected. That alone made Euphemia straighten slightly. He was composed, respectful, more careful with his words than most men in his position, but not evasive. And more importantly, he spoke plainly about the reconstruction, not in sentimental terms, but in practical ones. A small, hopeful smile touched Euphemia's face before she could stop it. Cornelia noticed, of course. He made it clear that Naruto is the one overseeing the work in Shinjuku personally, she continued, and that he believes my allowing you to involve yourself may help stabilize the relationship between the administration and the reconstruction effort. Euphemia tried to keep her expression under control, but it was becoming difficult. So, she said, a little too quickly, what is it you've decided, sister? The slip was immediate. Cornelia noticed it, weighed it, and chose not to correct her. Euphemia had always been like this when it came to helping others. Too earnest. Too open-hearted. Too willing to throw herself into situations without first considering how easily that kindness could be exploited. Cornelia feared that one day the world would punish her for that. Still, for now, she let it pass. As long as no problems arise from the actions of the Namikaze Corporation, Cornelia said at last, I will permit you to support the reconstruction of Shinjuku. Euphemia's shoulders eased slightly. Cornelia continued before she could speak. More than that, I am authorizing you to act as the government's direct point of contact with Naruto Namikaze on matters concerning the reconstruction. Any official coordination between the administration and the project will go through you. Euphemia blinked in surprise. With Naruto? Yes, Cornelia said. You wished to involve yourself personally. This is that opportunity. Euphemia's hands tightened together, though not from fear now. Cornelia's voice sharpened just slightly. You will, of course, be properly escorted. And you will provide regular reports to me regarding your meetings, his progress, and any developments of concern. Is that understood, Sub-Viceroy Euphemia? Euphemia bowed her head at once. Yes, Viceroy. I understand. For a moment, she looked almost too pleased with the answer. Cornelia let her have that much. Is that all? Euphemia asked. Yes, Cornelia said. You may go. Euphemia gave one more small bow before turning and leaving the room, the door closing softly behind her. The silence that followed lasted only a second. Then Guilford looked toward Cornelia. Your Highness, he said carefully, with all due respect, are you certain it is wise to allow Princess Euphemia that kind of involvement with the Namikaze Corporation? Cornelia gave him a look that was almost amused. Guilford, she said, if I did not know you better, I would think you were questioning my judgment. Of course not, Viceroy, Guilford replied at once. The hint of humor faded from Cornelia's face. I am certain of my decision, she said. Euphemia made it clear what she wanted. And without cause, I have no grounds to deny a request well within her authority as sub-viceroy. Darlton handed her another report. In Namikaze? He asked. Cornelia took the paper, though her thoughts were clearly elsewhere for a moment. Allowing Euphemia to work with that Naruto boy, does not mean I intend to stop watching them, she said. It only means I now have an easier way to do so. Guilford's expression sharpened slightly. And I assume Princess Euphemia is not to be told that. No, Cornelia replied. This remains between us. Both men straightened immediately. Yes, Viceroy, they said together. Cornelia turned her attention back to the papers in front of her, but her thoughts lingered for just a moment on her sister, on Naruto Namikaze, and on the reconstruction of Shinjuku. Standing in front of the Namikaze Corporation building, Naruto and Millie waited near the entrance as the afternoon light gleamed off the glass towers above them. Naruto had already stored his bike earlier, though Millie had made a point of commenting that someone from a company this large really should have a more dramatic entrance than a motorcycle. Naruto's answer had been simple. It gets me places faster. Millie had only smiled. That's exactly the kind of answer I expected from you. Before Naruto could respond, the car he had arranged pulled up smoothly along the curb. The doors opened, and the rest of the student council stepped out one by one. Shirley was the first to look up. Then Rivals. Then Colin. Even Lelouch, who was usually far too composed to let himself look impressed, paused for half a second, especially since it has been a while since he has been here. Mito stepped out last, smoothing her uniform before glancing up at the headquarters with a faintly amused look, as if the sight of the building towering above them was less impressive to her and more familiar. Rivals let out a low whistle. Okay, he said. I knew your family was rich, Naruto, but this is ridiculous. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, well, Dad doesn't really do things halfway. Mito folded her arms. That's one way of putting it. Millie clasped her hands behind her back, looking positively delighted. Oh, this is going to be fun. Colin looked from the building to Naruto. You grew up around all this. Naruto gave a small shrug. Kind of. Not really. He looked up at the tower for a moment, his expression softening. Dad built most of it while we were growing up. It didn't start like this. Mito nodded. At first it was smaller. A lot smaller. Naruto grinned faintly. I remember Mom yelling at Dad because he slept in his office 3 nights in a row. Mito's mouth twitched. And then she dragged him home by the tie. That happened more than once. Suzaku, who had stepped beside them, smiled faintly at the memory. I remember that. Naruto pointed at him. You were there for one of them. Suzaku's smile became a little more genuine. Your mother threatened to throw Minato-san over her shoulder if he didn't come home for dinner. She could have done it too, Naruto said proudly. She nearly did, Mito added. The others stared between them, half amused and half bewildered. Lelouch arched a brow. Your family sounds lively. Naruto gave him a look. You've met my mom. Lelouch conceded with a slight nod. Fair point. With that, Naruto led them inside. The lobby was wide, elegant, and almost impossibly polished, with gleaming floors, vaulted ceilings, and soft light spilling across the marble in clean, golden lines. The air smelled faintly of fresh water, polished stone, and expensive flowers. At the center of the lobby stood a massive fountain. Rising from the water was a marble statue of a beautiful red-haired woman, carved with such care that she seemed almost alive. Her hair flowed behind her as if caught by wind, and her expression held warmth, fire, and impossible patience all at once. Colin slowed without meaning to. Wow, she said quietly. She's beautiful. Naruto stopped beside her, gaze lifting to the statue. She is. Colin glanced at him. Naruto's usual grin softened into something warmer. That's Mom. The group went quiet. Shirley looked between Naruto, Mito, and the statue. That's your mother. Mito nodded, her voice quieter than usual. Kushina Uzumaki. Rivals blinked. They made a statue of your mom in the lobby. Naruto scratched his cheek. Dad did. Mito sighed, but there was affection in it. Mom said it was embarrassing. Naruto laughed softly. She yelled at him for a week. And then cried when she thought nobody was watching, Mito added. Naruto smiled up at the statue. Dad said the company wouldn't exist without her. That every time things got rough, Mom was the one who reminded him why he started building it in the first place. Mito's expression softened further. And Mom said if he was going to put her in marble, he should at least make her look taller. That earned a laugh from Shirley and Rivals. Colin looked back up at the statue, then at Naruto. You're proud of her. Naruto's answer came immediately. Yeah. There was no joke in it. No embarrassment. Just honesty. Then he grinned. Besides, apparently I got Dad's face and Mom's personality, so I kind of have to be proud of both. Mito gave him a dry look. You got Mom's temper too. Naruto turned to her with exaggerated offense. Wow. Betrayed in front of guests. You make it easy. Suzaku chuckled under his breath. Naruto pointed at him. Don't encourage her. Suzaku lifted both hands. I wouldn't dare. Before Naruto could fire back, the main elevator opened. Kushina stepped out first. The moment Lelouch and Suzaku saw her, something in both of them eased without them meaning to. Years had passed, but there was still something unmistakably familiar about Kushina Uzumaki. She carried herself like a storm, pretending to be a person, warm one moment, terrifying the next, and somehow comforting because of both. Naruto brightened. Hey, Mom. Kushina smiled as she approached, but the teasing light in her eyes appeared almost instantly. Well, look at this, she said. Naruto and Mito finally brought friends. I was starting to worry people at school only tolerated you two out of pity. Mom, Mito said at once, already sounding long-suffering. Naruto put a hand over his heart. You wound me. Kushina reached him and, without hesitation, pinched his cheek. You'll survive. Mom. And you, she said, turning to Mito and pulling her into a quick side hug before the girl could escape, look like you've been pretending not to enjoy yourself. Mito stiffened slightly. I am not. Kushina smiled knowingly. Naruto leaned toward Rivals and whispered, this is how she interrogates people. I heard that, Kushina said. Naruto immediately straightened. Love you, Mom. Kushina's eyes narrowed playfully. Better. Then her expression softened as her gaze moved to Suzaku and Lelouch. Suzaku. Lelouch. Suzaku bowed his head slightly. It's good to see you again, Kushina-san. Lelouch offered a polite nod. It has been a while. Kushina looked at both of them for a quiet moment, and the teasing faded just enough for something maternal to show through. Too long, she said. The words hit harder than either boy expected. For Suzaku, it brought back shrine paths, loud dinners, Naruto yelling with food in his mouth, and Kushina scolding him like he was one of her own. For Lelouch, it brought back a warmer time, before too much had been lost, before masks had become easier than honesty. Kushina, sensing the shift, smiled again and turned toward the whole group. Welcome to Namikaze Corporation. Since you're all here for a tour, I'll take you up to Minato's office first. Millie stepped forward with a bright smile. Thank you for having us, Mrs. Uzumaki. Kushina's smile sharpened with approval. Polite and dangerous. I like you already. Naruto muttered, please don't encourage her. Millie beamed. Too late. Kushina led them toward the elevator, with Naruto and Mito falling in near the front while the others followed behind. The ride upward was smooth and quiet, broken only by Rival's muttering that he was pretty sure the elevator was nicer than his room. Naruto looked at him. Your room has buttons. No, but now I want some. Mito didn't look at him. That explains a lot. When the doors opened onto the top floor, the student council fell quiet again. The entire floor felt private. Soft carpet muffled their steps. Framed photographs lined one wall. Groundbreaking ceremonies, relief operations, infrastructure projects, charity events, and older images of Minato and Kushina standing together before the company had become what it was now. Shirley stopped briefly in front of one photo. It showed a younger Minato in a wrinkled dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, asleep at a desk with a toddler Naruto curled on his lap. Kushina stood behind them in the picture, one hand on her hip and a fondly exasperated expression on her face. Shirley smiled. This is adorable. Naruto groaned. Why is that picture still up? Mito came over, looked at it, then smirked. Because it's the only proof that you were quiet as a child. I was asleep. Exactly. Kushina glanced back at the photo, her own expression softening. He used to refuse to sleep unless your father was in the room, she said. Minato would be trying to review contracts, and Naruto would crawl into his lap and pass out there like it was his personal bed. Naruto looked away, ears slightly red. Mom. Colin glanced at him, then at the picture, her expression gentler than before. Millie leaned in with bright interest. Oh, we definitely need copies of these. No, Naruto said immediately. Mito nodded. Yes. Naruto whipped toward her. Whose side are you on? Histories. Before the argument could continue, the office doors opened. Minato stepped out personally. He wore a crisp suit, calm as ever, though the moment his eyes landed on Naruto and Mito, the formality in his face warned. Welcome, he said, his gaze moving over the group before settling briefly on Suzaku and Lelouch. It's good to see all of you. Then he looked at his children. Naruto. Mito. Hey, Dad, Naruto said. Mito smiled faintly. Dad. Minato walked over and, much to Naruto's silent resignation, reached out to fix his collar. Naruto blinked. Really? It was uneven. It was fine. It is fine now. Mito covered her mouth, hiding a smile. Minato turned to her next and gently brushed a stray strand of hair away from her face. And you look tired. Mito's expression shifted into mild offense. I'm fine. Kushina snorted. That means she stayed up reading. I was studying. At 2 in the morning. Mito went silent. Naruto pointed at her triumphantly. Caught. Kushina immediately turned on him. You were awake too. Naruto froze. I was supporting her academically. Minato's mouth twitched. Kushina sighed and reached up to tug Naruto lightly by the ear. My children, she said to the student council, are very gifted. Unfortunately, they are also idiots. Mom. Only sometimes, Mito protested. Frequently, Minato corrected gently. The student council laughed, and even Lelouch looked faintly amused. For a moment, the top floor of Namikaze Corporation did not feel like the headquarters of one of the most powerful companies in Area 11. It felt like a family home. Then Minato straightened, returning to the role expected of him. I'm sorry I won't be able to personally give the full tour, he said. Unfortunately, several meetings require my attention. He looked to Naruto and Mito. Until then, I'll leave the tour in your hands. Try not to scare your guests. No promises, Naruto said immediately. Mito sighed. I'm the one keeping this from turning into chaos. That sounds accurate, Minato said. Naruto looked betrayed. Dad. Minato gave him a calm smile. Am I wrong? Naruto opened his mouth. Paused. Closed it. Kushina patted his shoulder. Good choice. Minato's expression softened slightly as he looked at Naruto again. Naruto, later, when you have a few minutes, there's something I'd like to show you. Naruto raised a brow. That sounds ominous. It's not. Kushina crossed her arms. It is a little. Minato glanced at her. She shrugged. What? It is. Naruto looked between them. Now I'm definitely worried. We'll talk later, Minato said. Naruto nodded slowly. Got it. Kushina stepped back beside Minato as Naruto turned toward the group. Alright, Naruto said. Since we're already up here, we might as well start with this floor. The others followed him and Mito into the office proper. The office itself was surprisingly normal in layout. Desk, chairs, sofas, mounted screens, and shelves filled with reports, books, and a few framed family pictures. But the sheer scale of it, and the fact that it sat at the center of an entire private floor, made it feel anything but ordinary. Rivel sank onto one of the sofas and nearly melted. So let me get this straight, he said. Your dad basically has an entire floor to himself. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. Pretty much. The room outside is for people with personal appointments with me or dad. Otherwise, most meetings happen in conference rooms lower in the building. Millie had already wandered toward a sealed elevator door set apart from the rest of the room. And what's this? She asked, eyes gleaming. Naruto glanced over. That goes down to one of Dad's private labs. Also a few sleeping quarters in case any of us are stuck here overnight. Private lab. Millie repeated, practically glowing with curiosity. Lelouch folded his arms. I'm guessing that won't be part of the tour. Definitely not, Naruto said with a grin. Besides, it's probably a mess. Especially the rooms. Millie turned back toward him, her smile widening in a way that immediately put Colin on edge. Oh, we don't mind a little mess. In fact, if we found some of your laundry lying around, I'm sure half the girls at school would finally get the answer to one very important question. Naruto blinked. What question? Millie placed a hand dramatically over her heart. Boxers or briefs? Every boy in the room reacted with some degree of embarrassment. Nina's face went pink. Shirley looked scandalized. Millie. Mito closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Kushina, still near the doorway with Minato, stared for one beat. Then she laughed. Naruto whipped toward her. Mom. Kushina wiped at the corner of one eye. I'm sorry, sweetie, but you walked right into that. Minato coughed lightly into his fist, clearly pretending not to be amused. Naruto stared at him. Dad. Minato's expression was perfectly composed. I said nothing. You wanted to laugh. I would never. Kushina leaned toward the student council and stage whispered, he absolutely would. Naruto looked like he wanted to disappear. Millie, naturally, was thriving. Oh, don't be so tense, Naruto, she purred. You know, if you asked nicely, I might even tell you what color mine are. Millie. Shirley yelped again, louder this time. What? Millie asked innocently. I'm just trying to make our host feel welcome. Naruto took one slow step back. Madam President, he said carefully, can you maybe not do that in front of my parents? Kushina grinned. Oh, don't stop on our account. Naruto's soul visibly left his body. Mito turned to her mother. You are not helping. I'm enjoying myself. Colin, however, was not. Millie stepped closer to Naruto, entirely shameless, and draped herself against his side with one arm slipping lightly around his waist. Colin felt something hot twist sharply in her chest. It came so fast she almost didn't recognize it. Possessiveness. Annoyance. Jealousy. The urge to march forward and remove Millie from Naruto by force hit her hard enough to startle even herself. Naruto, meanwhile, gave a strained smile. Madam President, he said, please. Nope, Millie chirped. Colin took one step forward before she could stop herself. Then another. Her voice, when it came, was soft. Madam President, Colin said, smiling with an ease that fooled absolutely no one paying attention, I really think you should stop. The room went still. Naruto looked between them, confused. Mito noticed. Suzaku noticed. Lelouch noticed. Minato noticed. Kushina absolutely noticed, almost beaming in pride. Millie noticed most of all. Her grin turned wicked. Oh, Millie said brightly. I see. Colin's eyes widened. Why, you see what? Millie released Naruto and practically pounced on Colin instead, pulling her into a delighted hug. Oh, you are just too cute. Colin stiffened completely. What are you talking about? Millie pulled back just enough to wink. Don't worry. I'm not the kind of girl who gets in the way of this sort of thing. Colin went bright red. Naruto looked utterly lost. I have no idea what's happening. That makes one of us, rivals muttered. Kushina leaned toward Minato, lowering her voice just enough that only he could hear. Looks like our boy's finally getting interesting, and it's a girl that has almost as much spunk as when we were kids. Minato's gaze flicked from Colin to Naruto, then back again. He may need help surviving it. Kushina smiled. He gets that from you. Minato looked at her. I'm not sure that's accurate. You married me, didn't you? He paused. Then nodded. Fair. Mito crossed her arms and stepped forward before the situation somehow became worse. How about, she said, we continue the tour before Millie says something else that ruins all of our lives. That's fair, Naruto said immediately. Colin still looked mortified. Millie looked delighted. Kushina looked far too pleased. Minato looked like he was carefully filing the entire scene away for future parental teasing. Naruto caught that look and narrowed his eyes. Dad. No. Minato blinked innocently. No what? You know what? I have no idea. Kushina slipped an arm around Minato's and smiled. He definitely knows. Naruto groaned. Mito grabbed his sleeve and pulled him toward the door. Come on before this gets worse. It can get worse. With this family? Mito asked. Always. And with that, Naruto and Mito led the others back out of the office to finally begin the real tour, while Colin did her absolute best to ignore the fact that, for one reckless second, she had almost acted like Naruto was hers to defend. Behind them, Kushina watched the group go with a warm smile. They're growing up, she said softly. Minato stood beside her, his gaze lingering on Naruto and Mito as they disappeared into the hall. They are. Kushina leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. You hate it a little, don't you? Minato's expression softened. A little. Then, after a pause, he added, but I'm proud of them. Kushina smiled. Yeah, she said. Me too. Naruto decided the first stop on the tour would be the Research and Development Division. It was, in his opinion, a far better place to start than dragging everyone through rows of offices and conference rooms in the business wing. If he was going to show his friends the Namikaze Corporation, then he might as well start with the part of the company that actually felt alive. The moment they stepped into the R floor, the atmosphere changed. Glass-walled labs stretched out in every direction. Monitors lit up entire workspaces with streams of data. Half-finished devices sat on worktables beside sealed tools and dismantled prototypes. Engineers and researchers moved from station to station with the focused, hurried energy of people too busy building the future to notice anything else. Of everyone in the group, Nina was taking it the hardest. In the best possible way. She looked like she might actually burst from excitement at any second. Naruto noticed and smiled a little before turning toward the others. This is the Research and Development Division, he said. Most of the recent advances Namikaze corporations become known for start here, whether that means improvements to everyday technology, medical equipment, or entirely new products we think the public can actually use. He gestured toward a nearby enclosed lab where something shaped like a long silver brace was being tested on a mounted frame. And since R is also responsible for rolling out new consumer products, he added, they'll be the ones responsible for a lot of the prizes at the ball. Millie's eyes lit up immediately. Do we know what those prizes are going to be yet? Naruto shook his head. Not yet. I still need to go through the latest development lists and figure out what'll be ready in time. He glanced at her. Though I think we should probably make the final call together, since you're the one running the whole thing. Millie put a hand dramatically over her chest. I knew I liked you for a reason. Colin, who was standing just to Naruto's other side, narrowed her eyes slightly at that but said nothing. Then a loud, excited voice cut across the floor. Yes. Everyone turned at once. The shout had come from a station farther down the room. Naruto recognized the voice immediately, though from the looks on the student council's faces, none of them did. Which made sense. Reika Solis was not exactly the kind of person someone forgot after meeting her. Naruto led the group toward the source with Mito walking beside him and Colin a step behind. At the far terminal, a girl around Mito's age stood beside a half-disassembled machine, both fists raised triumphantly over her head. She had bright yellow hair with crimson-red highlights running through the lower layers and framing bangs, most of it tied into a short, energetic ponytail that bounced with every movement. A white lab coat hung over a fitted black blouse and dark skirt, and she was doing a tiny victory dance in front of the terminal. I knew it, Reika said happily. I knew that was the issue. Naruto stopped a few feet away, arms folding loosely across his chest. Figured out what this time, Reika. The girl froze. Slowly, she turned. The moment her red gold eyes landed on Naruto, her face lit up not with surprise, but with the bright satisfaction of someone who had just been given an audience. Oh, good, she said, grinning. You're here. Naruto blinked once. That sounded dangerous. It's only dangerous if you don't appreciate genius. Mito sighed from beside him. So yes. Dangerous. Reika ignored her completely and stepped closer, clasping her hands behind her back as she leaned forward just enough to make the motion deliberately teasing. Naruto Namikaze, she said warmly. You know, you really should visit R&D more often. Morale improves when the company's most handsome executive decides to grace us with his presence. Naruto stared at her. Rival's eyes widened. Millie's smile sharpened instantly. Colin's expression went very still. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not an executive. You're close enough, Reika replied smoothly. And if you want, I can call you something else. Colin's arms folded tighter. Wow, she said flatly. Subtle. Reika's eyes flicked toward her, and her smile turned innocent in the most suspicious way possible. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to be? Colin's brow twitched. Naruto immediately lifted both hands slightly. Okay. Before someone starts a war in the lab, what did you figure out? Reika brightened again as if nothing had happened. That, she said, pointing dramatically at the half-disassembled machine, is the correct question. A dry female voice came from behind them. It was also the question she was hoping someone would ask before she started shouting again. They all turned. An older woman approached from another workstation, about 25 if Naruto had to guess, with the same yellow hair streaked through with red. Hers fell longer and straighter around her shoulders. She wore a fitted white coat over darker professional clothes, and unlike Reika, she carried herself with the smooth patience of someone very used to handling chaos she privately found exhausting. She stopped beside Reika and gave Naruto a polite nod. Mr. Namikaze. Naruto smiled slightly. Kaide. Colin glanced between them. Kaide's gaze shifted briefly to the rest of the group. I see you brought visitors. Student council tour, Naruto said. Apparently I lost control of my life somewhere between breakfast and agreeing to help Millie plan a ball. Millie clasped her hands together. You say that like I forced you. You did. I encouraged you. With threats. Creative encouragement. Kaide's mouth curved faintly. That sounds about right. Reika leaned closer to Naruto again, looking up at him with exaggerated admiration. Personally, I think it's noble. Generous. Inspiring. Her smile turned playful. Very attractive leadership quality, really. Colin made a quiet sound in the back of her throat. Naruto's eyes flicked toward her, and he immediately coughed into his fist. Reika. What? Reika asked, all innocence. Work. Fine, fine. She waved him off, then looked at the student council. For the record, he's always this serious when he's embarrassed. I am not embarrassed. You're a little embarrassed. I'm regretting hiring geniuses. Kaide folded her arms. You didn't hire her. I did. Naruto looked at her. Then I'm regretting trusting you. Reika pointed proudly at herself. But you admit I'm a genius. Mito muttered, unfortunately, that part seems hard to argue. Rivals leaned toward Shirley and whispered, "Is it just me, or is this place way more entertaining than school?" Shirley smiled nervously. "It's definitely something." Colin's gaze stayed fixed on Reika for a second longer. Then Reika returned to the terminal, fingers moving rapidly over the display. "The energy loop instability," she said, "all teasing gone now, replaced by sharp focus. Or, more specifically, the flaw in the transfer pacing." She tapped the screen, pulling up a rotating model of the system. Lines of data unfolded across the display. Whoever handled this before kept treating the loss rate like a fuel problem. It isn't. It's a rhythm problem. Nina had already stepped closer, eyes widening with interest. Reika continued, clearly in her element. "If the cycle is contained in a repeating pattern and the transfer timing is offset here." She pointed to one section of the model. "And here, then the internal flow stops bleeding efficiency every rotation. Which means the battery doesn't keep chewing through output at the same rate." She turned back to them, grinning. "So, in theory, you could sustain a much longer active load without needing constant recharge input." A brief silence followed. Most of the student council had understood about half of that at best. Nina, however, looked like someone had just opened a door to heaven. Naruto blinked, then looked at Kaide. "She actually solved it." Kaide nodded once. "She found the flaw. And she was right." Reika clasped a hand over her heart. "Praise from my sister. I'll treasure this moment forever." "You'll forget it the next time I tell you to clean your station," Kaide replied. Reika gasped. "Cruel." Millie leaned toward Naruto. "I like them." Naruto gave a tired smile. "That makes one of us." Reika looked offended. "You adore me." Colin's eyes narrowed again. Naruto immediately said, "As an employee." Reika tilted her head. "For now." Colin stepped forward slightly. "For now." Reika smiled sweetly. "Oh, don't worry. I'm very patient." Mito slowly brought one hand to her face. "This tour is going to end with someone getting thrown through a window." Suzaku, standing near the back, looked between Colin and Reika before deciding with absolute certainty that silence was the safest option. Millie looked delighted. Shirley looked worried. Rivals looked like he wanted popcorn. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose. "Everyone," he said, forcing the conversation forward, "this is Kaide Solis, one of our lead systems engineers. And this is her younger sister, Reika Solis." Reika lifted a hand. "Future genius of the division." "Current menace," Kaide corrected. "Both can be true," Reika said. Naruto sighed. "Kaide, Reika, these are my friends from Ashford's student council." Introductions followed one by one. When Nina quietly gave her name, Kaide's expression sharpened with genuine interest. "Nina Einstein." Nina stiffened. "Why yes." Kaide exchanged a brief look with Naruto. "I've heard that name before," Kaide said. "More than once." Nina's face went bright red. Reika leaned toward her sister, whispering loudly, "Is she the one?" "She may be," Kaide replied. Nina looked like she wanted to disappear and stay forever at the same time. Naruto noticed and stepped in smoothly. "Nina's got the kind of mind R&D likes," he said. "That's probably what she means." That only made Nina blush harder. Reika studied Nina with interest, then grinned. "Don't worry. I only bite people who deserve it." Nina blinked rapidly. I wasn't worried about that." "You should be a little," Kaide said dryly. Millie laughed. Naruto looked toward the display table loaded with prototypes, half-finished parts, sealed components, and a few things that definitely looked too expensive to be left sitting out in the open. "So," he said to Kaide, "if we're starting the tour here, can you walk them through the floor properly?" Kaide nodded. "Of course." "Wait," Rivals said, looking around. "Before the official tour starts, what exactly is all this? Because half of it looks like it came out of a science fiction movie." "That's because your imagination is weak," Reika said immediately. "Reika," Kaide warned. "I'm being helpful." "You're being you." "Exactly." Kaide sighed, then gestured toward the display table. "This division handles high-efficiency energy systems, mobility support technology, advanced medical adjacent tools, and several civilian infrastructure prototypes, she explained. Most of what you see here won't reach public markets for some time. Some of it is still in closed testing. Naruto nodded. And before anyone asks, yes, some of the prizes for the ball are probably going to come from this floor. That immediately recaptured everyone's attention. Millie's eyes lit up. Oh, now I'm even more invested. Reika looked between them. There's a ball. Mito's voice was flat. There is now. I want to attend. Rivals pointed at her. You're not even part of the school. Reika looked straight at Naruto. You could fix that. Colin took one step forward. Could he? Naruto looked between them and slowly lifted one finger. No. Reika pouted. Kaide nodded approvingly. Good answer. Naruto turned to Colin, keeping his voice low. You know she's messing with you, right? Colin's expression did not change. I know. That does not sound like you know. I know, Colin repeated, even more dangerously. Reika smiled from the terminal. She's cute when she's annoyed. Colin's eyes snapped back to her. Naruto quickly stepped between the lines of sight. Tour. We are doing a tour. Mito gave him a sidelong look. You sound scared. I'm not scared. I'm maintaining peace. You're scared. A little. That finally made Shirley laugh. Even Colin's mouth twitched, though she tried to hide it. Kaide took mercy on him and turned toward the group. This way, she said. We'll begin with the energy systems wing. Please avoid touching anything marked in red. Rivals raised a hand. What happens if we touch something marked in red? Reika grinned. You become part of the test data. Rivals immediately lowered his hand. As the group began moving, Reika lingered just long enough to fall into step beside Naruto. She leaned closer and said, just softly enough for Colin to hear, for the record, I was serious. You should visit more. Naruto glanced at her. For work reasons. Reika smiled. Among others. Colin moved to Naruto's other side with impressive speed. Interesting, Colin said coolly. Because I was just thinking he already has a very busy schedule. Reika looked across Naruto at her and smiled. Then I suppose I'll have to make an appointment. Naruto stared forward. Mito. Yes. Help. No. You're my sister. And this is fun. Naruto groaned under his breath. Kaide, walking ahead, did not turn around, but Naruto could see her shoulders shake once with silent amusement. The tour continued deeper into the Research and Development Division, the student council staring wide-eyed at the company's brightest floor while Naruto walked in the middle of two very different storms. One was Reika Solis, brilliant and shameless. The other was Colin Statfeld, quiet, dangerous, and clearly not amused. And somehow, Naruto already knew the machinery was going to be the least complicated part of the tour. Leaving the three science-minded girls behind in R&D, the rest of the group followed Naruto deeper into another wing of the building. Naruto walked at the front with Mito beside him, while Colin lingered close enough that her shoulder occasionally brushed his arm whenever the hallway narrowed. She pretended not to notice. Naruto noticed. Mito definitely noticed. The next stop, Naruto said, clearing his throat, is an indoor garden connected to the Medical Research Division. Millie raised a brow. An indoor garden. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Mito gave the others a sidelong look. He's underselling it. That became obvious the moment they stepped through the doors. The remaining members of the student council stopped almost in unison. Calling it a garden felt absurd. It was closer to a small indoor park. Trees rose toward the high glass ceiling, their leaves catching warm sunlight that spilled down through reinforced panes. Flower beds curved along winding stone paths in careful bursts of color. Benches sat beneath shaded corners, some occupied by employees quietly reading, resting, or eating lunch. Bushes lined the walkway, and a narrow river ran through the center of it all, the water glimmering in soft ripples as it passed beneath small arched bridges. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then Colin closed her eyes and drew in a slow breath. This place is incredible. Naruto's face brightened a little at that. You think so? Colin opened her eyes and looked at him, a faint smile touching her mouth. I do. Mito, walking just ahead of them, coughed lightly into her fist. Naruto glanced at her. What? Nothing, Mito said, far too innocently. Just admiring the garden. Colin's cheeks colored faintly. Millie looked around with genuine appreciation. I'll say. This is gorgeous. It's beautiful, Shirley said softly, her eyes moving from the trees to the river and then up toward the glass ceiling. It doesn't even feel like we're still inside the building. Naruto grinned at their reactions. Thanks. I'm the one who takes care of this place, so I'm glad you all like it. That earned him a round of surprised looks. Really? Millie asked with a playful smile. Who would have guessed the great Naruto Namikaze had such a green thumb? Rival stared around the garden again. Seriously, is there anything you can't do? Naruto scratched the back of his head, looking sheepish despite himself. Well, I've never tried painting, he admitted. So maybe that. That sounds exactly like something a person who's good at everything would say, Lelouch remarked dryly. Shirley looked toward him and nodded. That actually sounds a lot like you too, Lulu. It never looks like you have to try very hard at anything. Is that so? Lelouch said lightly. I've never noticed. Naruto snorted. Sure you haven't. Colin glanced at Naruto again, this time toward his hands. You really take care of all of this yourself. Most of it, Naruto said. There's a maintenance team, obviously, but I like doing the actual gardening when I have time. That's, Colin paused, searching for the word. Naruto tilted his head. Weird. No, she said quickly. Nice. He looked briefly caught off guard by that. Then he smiled. Thanks. Mito slowed just enough to fall into step on Naruto's other side. Careful, Colin. Compliment him too much and he'll start pretending he's humble. Naruto gave her an offended look. I am humble. Mito stared at him. Colin laughed under her breath. Naruto pointed at both of them. Wow. Betrayed from both sides. More like accurately assessed, Mito said. Colin's smile widened just a little. She has a point. Naruto placed a hand dramatically over his chest. This is bullying. Millie clasped her hands together. An excellent entertainment. Naruto groaned but kept walking, clearly fighting a smile. Anyway, he said, clapping his hands once, back on topic. This garden, the rec room, the library, the gym, they were all built so people here have somewhere to breathe. That explains a lot, Millie said with a content sigh. I could spend a whole day in here. Rivals perked up immediately. Wait, rec room. Naruto nodded. Yeah, though most people here are too serious to use it properly, so it's kind of become my private game room. Mito crossed her arms. That is not what it was built for. It's what it became. That is not a defense. It's a historical explanation. Colin leaned slightly toward him. Do you actually use it that much? Naruto shrugged. Only when I'm waiting on dad or avoiding paperwork. Mito's eyes narrowed. So constantly. I said only when. You implied constantly. I implied strategically. Colin smiled again. The others followed the winding path toward a small seating area tucked near the river, where a long table had already been prepared. Rather than the usual cakes or finger sandwiches one might expect from a corporate hospitality spread, the table was covered in carefully arranged ramen assortments. There were small tasting bowls lined in neat rows miso, shio, shoyu, tonkatsu, spicy sesame, and vegetable broth. Beside them sat trays of toppings, marinated eggs, sliced green onions, bamboo shoots, Naruto maki, grilled corn, seaweed, mushrooms, and neatly portioned meats. Rivals stopped dead. Is that ramen? Naruto's face lit up like someone had just handed him a prize. Yes. Mito sighed. He helped choose the refreshments. Millie looked delighted. Of course he did. Shirley laughed softly. This is actually really cute. Naruto grabbed one of the small bowls and pointed at the table with his chopsticks. You say that now, but this is high-quality ramen. Respect the spread. Colin picked up a tasting bowl, amused. You're very serious about this. Naruto looked at her as if she had said something obvious. It's ramen. That explains everything, Mito said. Colin took a small bite, then blinked. Oh. This is actually really good. Naruto leaned closer, eager despite himself. Which one? Colin glanced at the label. Spicy sesame. He grinned. Good choice. Mito leaned toward Millie and said, loud enough to be heard, he's going to remember that forever. Naruto turned red. I am not. Colin looked down into her bowl, cheeks faintly pink. It is good. Mito's smile turned wicked. See. Forever. Naruto muttered something into his own ramen while everyone else laughed. After a few minutes, Colin pointed ahead toward a glass wall with automated doors built into it. Beyond the glass, the garden continued for a short distance before giving way to another section of the building. The narrow river ran beneath the doors and into the next wing. What's that? One of the entrances to the medical division, Naruto answered, setting his bowl down and starting toward it at an easy pace. Everyone followed. The moment they stepped through the doors, several security guards moved into position around them. Shirley immediately tensed. Did we do something wrong? Lelouch's face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened at once. Colin's expression hardened too, her body already preparing to react if this turned into a problem. Mito, however, let out a long, suffering sigh. Naruto heard it and glanced at her. Don't you say anything. Mito folded her arms. Oh, I'm going to let them explain. That only confused the others more. Then one of the men stepped forward, a Japanese man with dark brown hair, black eyes, and a white lab coat worn over a button-up shirt and dark trousers. He had the amused expression of someone who found this situation far funnier than he should have. No, he said warmly. You haven't done anything wrong. He gestured toward the guards. These men are here under direct orders from Mrs. Uzumaki. Their job is to make sure Mr. Namikaze does not go anywhere near the medicinal plants. There was a beat of silence. Millie blinked. What? The man smiled and gave a polite nod. Tanjiro Hoshigaki, he said. Chief researcher of the medical division. Introductions followed quickly, though most of the group was still too distracted by his explanation to focus properly. Millie looked back at Naruto, eyes gleaming. Why are you banned from the plants? Naruto deadpanned instantly. Because I can't tell the difference between medicinal herbs and weeds. Rivals burst out laughing. Naruto sighed and continued before anyone else could. I can take care of flowers, trees, rare plants, exotic plants, whatever. But the second somebody asks me to sort herbs, they die, Hoshigaki supplied cheerfully. Naruto shot him a look. Mito nodded with complete seriousness. He's a great gardener, she said. He really is. But when it comes to herbs, he is hopeless. Naruto pointed at her. You did not need to agree that fast. I absolutely did. Colin covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Naruto noticed immediately. Not you too. I didn't say anything, Colin said. You're laughing with your eyes. Mito hummed. She does that a lot around you. Colin's face went pink. Mito. What? It's true. Naruto looked between them. I feel like I'm missing something again. Millie beamed. You usually are. That finally broke the tension, and laughter spread through the group. So I guess there is something you can't do, Rivals said with a grin. Naruto gave a long-suffering grunt in reply, which only made it worse. Can we continue the tour now? He asked, though it came out sounding much more like a complaint than a request. Of course, Hoshigaki said pleasantly. If everyone would follow me. From there, Tanjiro led them through the medical division, explaining each section and how the department worked both within the company and alongside outside hospitals and research teams. He also explained how often they collaborated with R to develop new equipment and treatment methods. As they walked, Colin fell into step beside Naruto again. So, she said quietly, gardens, ramen, and terrible herb identification. Naruto gave her a sideways look. That better not be the summary of my entire personality. She tilted her head as if considering it. No. You also ride motorcycles and get embarrassed easily. I do not get embarrassed easily. Mito, walking just ahead, said without turning around, yes, you do. Naruto closed his eyes. I regret bringing you. No, you don't. He opened one eye, saw Mito smiling to herself, then glanced back at Colin. Colin was smiling too. And somehow, despite the teasing, the security guards, and the fact that half the group would probably never let him live down the herb incident, Naruto found himself smiling back. By the end of the medical division tour, even the less academically minded members of the council were impressed. There was something reassuring about seeing so many brilliant people working so hard to make life better for others. And for all the joking at Naruto's expense, it was obvious that whatever else the Namikaze Corporation was, it had been built by people who genuinely meant to help. After leaving the medical division, Naruto and Mito continued leading their friends through the rest of the company. They stopped by the cafeteria first, though calling it a cafeteria felt almost insulting. The student council quickly discovered that Namikaze Corporation apparently believed its employees deserved meals that looked closer to a near 5-star restaurant than workplace lunch. Rivel stood in front of one display counter, staring at the options like he had found religion. This is where your employees eat. Naruto nodded. Yeah. Rivals turned to him slowly. You understand this is better than most restaurants, right? Mito picked up a small dessert cup from one of the chilled displays. Dad said people work better when they're properly fed. Naruto grabbed one too. Mom said if he was going to keep people here late, they'd better not be living off vending machine snacks. Suzaku smiled faintly. That sounds like Kushina-san. Lelouch, who had been examining the layout with quiet interest, added dryly, it also sounds exactly like Minato to turn common sense into corporate policy. Naruto grinned. See. They get it. Mito gave him a look. They grew up with you. Of course they get it. Naruto pointed at her with his spoon. That sounded like an insult. It was more of an observation. Your observations are usually insults. Only when they're accurate. Colin covered a small laugh behind her hand. Naruto glanced at her. You're laughing at me too. A little, Colin admitted. Unbelievable. I bring everyone to the nice food floor and this is how I'm treated. Mito took a bite of her dessert. You'll survive. They lingered there longer than expected, mostly because rivals insisted it would be criminal not to try at least 3 things, and Millie wholeheartedly encouraged him. From there, Naruto showed them the library and the rec room just as promised. The library was quiet and impressive, with walls of carefully catalogued books and research archives. The rec room, by contrast, immediately explained why Naruto liked it. Game tables, comfortable seating, older arcade cabinets, and a few modern entertainment systems tucked away from the company's more serious atmosphere. By the time they finally returned to the front lobby, everyone looked far more at ease than when they had first arrived. Rivel stretched his arms over his head. So, he asked, what now? Naruto was just walking back toward them after stepping away to speak with the receptionist and collect a few files. He tucked the folders under one arm and glanced across the group. Well, he said, I can have the car take everyone back. Then his grin tilted. Or we can keep this going and head over to Shinjuku. That changed the mood. Not badly, exactly. Just enough that everyone understood this was no longer a school tour. Shirley hesitated first. Would that be okay? I mean, we wouldn't want to get in the way. It's fine, Naruto said. You can look around, see what's being done. And if anyone wants to help a little, no one's going to stop you. I'll go, Suzaku said immediately. There was no hesitation in him. Naruto looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Mito looked between them, then folded her arms. I'm going too. Naruto glanced at her. You were going anyway. Yes, Mito said. But I thought I'd be polite and say it out loud. Naruto snorted. Since when? Since I realized you were going to make it sound like I was sneaking into the car. You absolutely would sneak into the car. Mito gave him a flat look. And you absolutely would forget something important if I didn't. Naruto opened his mouth, paused, then looked away. That happened once. Suzaku and Lelouch both looked at him. 3 times, Suzaku corrected. 4, Lelouch added. Naruto turned on them. Whose side are you two on? Lelouch's expression remained perfectly calm. Accuracies. Suzaku nodded. And Mito's, apparently. Mito smiled sweetly. Smart boys. Naruto put a hand over his heart. Betrayed by my childhood friends. In front of everyone. Colin's mouth curved faintly. They do seem pretty used to this. They have years of experience, Mito said. And scars, Suzaku said, deadpan. Naruto pointed at him. I was not that bad. Lelouch gave him a sidelong look. Naruto, you once convinced Suzaku to jump from the shrine roof with a bedsheet because you claimed it would work like a parachute. Colin blinked. Shirley gasped softly. You did what? Suzaku's expression went distant. It did not work. Naruto winced. In my defense, we were 8. That is not a defense, Lelouch said. It's context. It's evidence. Millie laughed brightly. Oh, I like this version of story time. Mito sighed, though she was smiling despite herself. Please don't encourage them. They'll keep going. Colin spoke next, her tone quieter. I'd like to go too. Naruto looked at her. There was something settled behind her voice. Something careful. She wanted to see Shinjuku for herself. And maybe she wanted to see what Naruto was actually doing there. Okay, Naruto said softly. Colin nodded once. The rest of the group took longer. Millie looked more intrigued than worried. Rivals was unsure but clearly leaning toward going. Shirley was nervous, but there was resolve in her expression. Nina looked the most hesitant of all. Lelouch said nothing at first. He was thinking. Probably too much. Naruto noticed, but before he could say anything, Mito stepped in. It's not like anyone's going to hand you a hard hat and draft you into construction, she said. You can just see the place and help where you can. Even handing out supplies matters. Rivals rubbed the back of his neck. When you put it like that. It'd feel weird not to go now, Shirley admitted. Millie smiled. Well, I'm not about to miss seeing Naruto's heroic reconstruction project in person. Naruto groaned. Please don't call it that. I absolutely will. Nina looked at the others, then at Naruto and Mito. If everyone else is going, she said quietly, then I'll go too. That left Lelouch. He exhaled softly through his nose, clearly aware that refusing would make him stand out more than he wanted. Fine, he said. I'll come too. Naruto grinned. Good. Lelouch narrowed his eyes. Don't look so pleased. I'm not. You are. Suzaku nodded. He is. Naruto looked between them again. You two are really enjoying this today. Suzaku's expression softened just slightly. It's familiar. That quieted Naruto for half a second. Then he cleared his throat and looked away. Yeah, well, give me a minute. I need to take care of a couple things first. He walked back to the receptionist's desk and gave a few quick instructions. The woman behind the desk accepted the files, handed him a different folder, and said something that made Naruto sigh like a man being gently scolded. When he returned, Mito was already watching him. What did she say? Naruto looked offended. Why assume she said anything? Because you made that face. What face? The face you make when someone reminds you of something you forgot. Suzaku immediately said, he forgot something. Lelouch nodded. Almost certainly. Naruto pointed at all three of them. I don't like how fast you formed an alliance. Mito held out her hand. Folder. Naruto stared at her for a second, then reluctantly handed it over. She opened it, scanned the first page, and nodded. You almost forgot the district access clearance. Rivals burst out laughing. Naruto threw both hands up. I remembered eventually. You remembered after someone gave it to you. That still counts. It absolutely does not. Millie tilted her head toward Naruto, amused. Is it normal for you to rely on the receptionist like that? For her to already have files ready before you ask? Naruto shook his head. She's not my receptionist. She works directly for my dad. Mito nodded while closing the folder. She's dad's secretary. She's basically the reason half the building still functions when things get chaotic. Naruto laughed. That's not even an exaggeration. Millie smiled. So Minato Namikaze has a secretary efficient enough to predict what you'll need before you know you need it. She's been around long enough to know how this family works, Mito said dryly. Naruto grinned. Which is probably why she also knows when I'm about to make extra work for everyone. Lelouch muttered, that does sound like you. Suzaku nodded again. It really does. Naruto turned slowly toward them. You know, I liked both of you more when we were kids and you were easier to impress. Lelouch arched a brow. You mean when your best plan was usually, run faster and hope. Suzaku added, or punch something until it stopped being a problem. Naruto paused. Then shrugged. Those are still good plans. Mito looked at Colin. See what I live with. Colin smiled softly. He seems consistent. Naruto looked betrayed again. Colin, not you too. She lifted her hands, innocent. I'm just saying. Mito gave her an approving nod. You're learning quickly. Naruto sighed dramatically. Anyway, now that my own sister and my oldest friends have attacked my dignity in public, can we go? Yes, Mito said immediately. Before you make it worse. I was not making it worse. You were about to. I was thinking about it. That's usually step one. With that, the group headed toward the exit together, leaving the lobby of Namikaze Corporation behind. Naruto walked near the front with Mito at his side, still grumbling under his breath while she calmly held the folder he had nearly forgotten. Suzaku and Lelouch followed close enough to hear them bicker, both wearing the faint, familiar expressions of boys who had known this routine long before Ashford, long before Britannia's lies, and long before the world had become so complicated. By the time they reached the reconstruction site, the first thing the student council noticed was that everyone was already working. Residents of Shinjuku moved across the district in steady, practiced rhythm. Some cleared rubble from damaged streets. Others sorted through debris, salvaged usable materials, or carried supplies from one temporary station to another. Repairs had already begun on the homes that could be saved. Naruto had apparently made one priority clear from the start. The residences came first. The faster people had roofs over their heads again, the faster Shinjuku could start feeling like a place to live instead of a wound left open. For the full-blooded Britannians in the group, standing among people who had been left with so little by Britannia's rule felt deeply uncomfortable. Even Shirley and Rivals, who had come in good faith, shifted slightly beneath the looks being sent their way. Lelouch remained outwardly composed, but his eyes caught every glance. Suzaku and Colin felt something different. Pride. Relief. And for Suzaku, a sting of regret that sat heavy in his chest and refused to move. It did not take long for whispers to begin. Some of the looks sent toward the student council were openly suspicious. Others were colder than that. But mixed among the distrust were warmer expressions too, small nods, faint smiles, murmured thanks. Almost all of those were directed at Naruto. A few moments later, Ogi made his way toward them. Hey, boss, he greeted, doing a good job of acting like Colin was just another visiting student. Good to see you here. Naruto nodded once. Ogi. Then he gestured toward the people beside him. These are my friends. Millie, Shirley, Colin, Rivals, Lelouch, Suzaku, his hand moved last toward Mito. And my little sister, Mito. Mito lifted a hand slightly. Hello. They wanted to help out today, Naruto continued. We'll need some day-to-day contracts ready. Ogi nodded, then looked over the group more officially. I'm Ogi. Naruto put me in charge of overseeing things when he isn't here. I handle the paperwork, track supplies, organize crews, and make sure everything on site keeps moving. Which means, Mito added dryly, he gets all the fun jobs. Ogi laughed. Something like that. After the contracts were signed and everyone was officially covered for the day, Naruto and Ogi split the group according to what was needed. Suzaku and Rivals were sent to help clear debris. Lelouch was initially placed with them as well, but it became obvious very quickly that physical labor was not going to be his strong suit for the day. After watching Lelouch struggle for exactly long enough to make the point, Naruto reassigned him to help Ogi with administrative work instead. Millie, Shirley, Colin, and Mito were sent to help with the children. Namikaze Corporation had set up a temporary daycare for the younger kids while their parents worked. It was immediately clear they needed people who could keep the children entertained, watched, and away from unsafe areas. Mito proved almost alarmingly good at it. The younger children took to her quickly, especially once she started organizing games with the older girls. Shirley was warm and patient. Millie somehow turned everything into a performance. Colin did better than she expected. And Mito became the one keeping the entire thing from collapsing into complete chaos. A few hours later, the girls were still with the children when Ogi stepped into the building being used for the daycare. I trust everything is going well. He asked pleasantly, though his eyes flicked toward Colin for only the briefest moment. Everything's fine, Millie answered with a smile. Mostly, Mito said, catching one child before he could launch himself off a bench. If you ignore the fact that these kids seem to have more energy than an army. One of the children looked up at her and grinned. Nay sans just slow. Mito stared at him in disbelief. Colin covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Ogi smiled. Well, I came to let you know dinner will be ready in about half an hour. If you can get the children washed up and settled, that would help. And of course, all of you are welcome to join us. Dinner. Shirley repeated, surprised enough to glance at the clock. Wow. I didn't even notice it got this late. We were busy, Mito said, straightening one of the smaller girl's collars. Very busy. At that moment, one of the children rushed over to Ogi with wide, hopeful eyes. Will Naruto-Nisan be cooking again? That got the attention of all the other children instantly. Ogi grinned. Yup. And I heard he's making dessert too. A cheer broke out so fast Shirley jumped. But, Ogi added firmly, only if all of you get washed up first. The children nodded furiously and practically sprinted off to do exactly that. Colin blinked. Naruto can cook. Mito looked at her like that was hardly the most surprising thing she had learned all day. He's annoyingly good at it, she said. But don't praise him too much or he'll pretend to be humble while obviously enjoying it. Millie tilted her head. Wait, what was that they called him? Naruto-Nisan. Ogi nodded. It's a term kids use for someone they look up to. Older brother, more or less, though not necessarily by blood. His gaze shifted toward the door the children had just run through. A lot of these kids, he hesitated for a second. This is the first time in a long while they've had a chance to just be children. Toys, games, meals they don't have to worry about earning, a place where someone is actually thinking about them. The room quieted. Mito's expression softened. Shirley looked down at the floor. Colin's small smile turned fonder. Naruto's done a lot for them, Colin said quietly. And not just him, Mito added. A lot of people here are trying. But yeah, he really has. Ogi nodded. More than most of us expected, at first. Millie looked between Colin and Mito with the sort of interest that meant trouble was seconds away. You know, she said, Naruto really is amazing. Colin wisely said nothing. Mito, unfortunately, made the mistake of reacting at all. Millie's smile widened. If I were either of you, she said sweetly, I'd make a move before some other girl does. Colin went red immediately. Mito closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Oh no, Shirley murmured, already seeing where this was headed. Ogi tried to look professional for about 2 seconds before giving up and smirking. Well, he said, you could both do worse. It is not like that, Colin said at once. Mito opened one eye. For the record, I'm not participating in this conversation. That sounds like deflection, Millie said. That sounds like survival. Oh, come on, Millie said, turning to Colin first. You definitely like him. I do not. Then Millie turned to Mito. And you? Mito gave her a flat stare. Naruto is my brother, Millie. Millie waved a hand. Not Naruto. I meant someone else. Mito's expression did not change. Still not participating. Millie leaned closer, smile turning bright and wicked. Oh, don't be like that. The little sister falling for the older brother's best friend is a classic for a reason. Mito froze. Colin's eyes widened slightly. Shirley's mouth parted. Ogi suddenly became very interested in the wall. Millie's smile grew. So, she continued, voice light and merciless, how long have you liked Suzaku? Mito's face went red so fast it nearly startled Colin. I do not. You looked outside when I asked, Millie said. I looked at the door. Suzaku is outside. That is a coincidence. It absolutely is not. Mito folded her arms tightly. Dinner was supposed to be ready soon, wasn't it? Ogi coughed, clearly fighting a laugh. Yes. It was. We should get everyone moving. Millie looked delighted. Colin leaned toward Mito and whispered, you know, that explains a lot. Mito shot her a betrayed look. You are supposed to be on my side. Colin smiled faintly. I am. That's why I'm not saying anything else. Too late. A few minutes later, the members of the student council, minus Naruto, were seated together at one of the long tables set up outside. Rivals looked ready to collapse. His head was down on the table, and he barely lifted it enough to speak. I'm exhausted. It wasn't that bad, Suzaku said with a small, amused smile. Rivals groaned. You are exactly the kind of person Lelouch warned me about. I warned you about him. Lelouch asked, looking up from where he sat beside Ogi with a stack of papers still nearby. Yes, Rivals said. You said he was some kind of exercise freak. That sounds accurate, Mito said. Suzaku let out a sheepish chuckle. A moment later, several residents who had taken on the role of waiters for the evening began bringing food to the tables. The student council went quiet. The spread looked incredible. More than incredible, actually it looked better than almost anything they had eaten earlier at Namikaze Corporation. Colin stared. Naruto made all of this. Yeah, Naruto said, appearing just in time to catch the question. Though, to be fair, I had help. From what I heard, Ogi said as he approached, with several of the others from the site, you're still the reason it smells this good. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Ogi glanced at the group. Mind if we sit here? Colin had the brief, violent urge to say absolutely not. Instead, she smiled politely and said nothing. Naruto answered for them. Sure. Ogi sat down with the others from the resistance group and began introducing them. These are my friends Inoue, Minami, Yoshida, Kento. He paused, glancing toward the one man who looked like he was already on the verge of causing problems. And that one with the attitude problem is Tamaki. Best to ignore him if you can. Hey. Before Tamaki could build up momentum, Naruto started handing out checks to the members of the student council. Normally I'd just pay you directly for the time you put in, he said, but I figured checks would be simpler. Suzaku looked down at his and frowned. I don't think I can accept this. It's yours, Suzaku, Naruto said. You worked for it. It still feels wrong. Naruto shrugged. Then donate it. Burn it. Frame it. I don't care. It's yours now. That got the faintest smile out of Suzaku, and he gave a small nod. With that settled, everyone finally turned to what mattered most. The food. This all looks so good, Shirley said. Rivals looked between Naruto and the dishes in front of them. You know, I was just starting to recover from finding out you can't tell herbs from weeds, and then you go and do this. Let's not focus on that, Naruto muttered. As if that was some kind of signal, the residents around them called out aloud, unified, Itadakimasu. The student council that wasn't Japanese froze. What was that? Millie asked. It's a Japanese custom, Suzaku explained. You say it before eating. It's kind of like saying, let's eat, or thanking everyone for the food. Naruto smiled faintly, looking out over the tables. Then he brought his hands together. Itadakimasu. Suzaku followed a heartbeat later, quieter but steady. Itadakimasu. Mito did the same beside them, her voice soft but clear. Itadakimasu. The others copied them, though only Colin got the pronunciation right on the first try. Millie tried her best and looked very proud of herself anyway. Once everyone had settled into the meal and the conversation softened, Ogi asked Naruto about the blueprints he had been reviewing earlier. I was looking over the plans for the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building, Naruto said, pointing toward the leaning structure in the distance so the student council could follow what he meant. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. What do you mean? Ogi asked. For starters, it isn't safe, Naruto said. That thing could come down if the wrong kind of pressure hits it. So whatever happens, it'll need to be rebuilt from the ground up. He paused, then went on. And after that, the bigger question is what it becomes. Since Britannia wiped out Japan's old government, the building doesn't have the same purpose anymore. Do you have any ideas? Colin asked. Naruto nodded. I'm thinking of turning it into a branch facility for Namikaze Corporation. Something close by that the people here can rely on if something goes wrong. He glanced back toward the distant building. I'm thinking of asking Dad if we can rename it Spiral. He said the last part half to himself, then looked back toward Ogi. I'll need you to make sure people hear what I'm planning before anything gets finalized. They should get a say in whether they're alright with it. Ogi nodded immediately. Got it. Enough business talk, Millie said, cutting cleanly through the moment. After working all day, you should all relax. I can't take this anymore. Tamaki suddenly burst out. Ogi's eyes closed for a second. Tamaki. But it was too late. Tamaki was already on his feet, glaring across the table. How are you all just sitting there like this is normal? He demanded. Sharing food with the enemy and a traitor like it's nothing. Rivals looked up, startled. What the hell is your problem? My problem. Tamaki snapped. He's over there whining about hard work. Who the hell do you think's responsible for all of this in the first place? Millie slammed both hands down on the table so hard the dishes rattled. Oh, don't start. Naruto, by contrast, stayed calm. Tamaki, he said, though there was an edge in his voice now, I've warned you about this before. Like I care. That was when voices started rising from the other tables. Hey, shut up already. Tamaki turned, only to find half the people there glaring at him. They're helping us. Who cares where they're from if they're actually doing something useful? They played with us all day. One of the children shouted, pointing toward the girls. The Naysans were nice. That drew everyone's attention back to Millie, Shirley, Colin, and Mito. Ogi took the chance to explain quickly. Naysan means older sister, more or less. Same kind of thing as Nisan. Millie blinked. Colin looked caught off guard. Mito, however, smiled just a little. Well, she said, at least we made a good impression. Ogi laughed. It seems like it. Tamaki looked around, realized he was losing, and threw up his hands. You know what? Fine. I'm done. Then he stormed off. Naruto let out a breath. Well, so much for a peaceful dinner. It wasn't peaceful, Lelouch said, setting down his chopsticks, but I'll admit it was mildly entertaining. Millie brightened at once. Oh. Then Naruto should sing. Naruto looked at her like she had lost her mind. No. Yes. No. Millie stood and turned toward the rest of the crowd. Does anyone have a guitar? Naruto's agreed to sing us something. I absolutely did not. A man nearby, who had apparently salvaged one, brought over a worn but still playable guitar. Please be careful with it. Naruto stared at Millie. Millie smiled back innocently. Mito leaned over and said very quietly, you should just do it. If you fight her on this, it'll only get worse. Naruto looked betrayed. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on my side. In the end, Naruto sighed and took the guitar. One song, he muttered. That's it. Then he stood, stepped forward where everyone could see him, and began to sing. By the time he finished, the mood had changed completely. People were clapping, cheering, smiling in a way they had not been when the night started. Naruto handed the guitar back to its owner and returned to the table. See, Millie said brightly. That wasn't so bad. Naruto sat down with a light blush on his face. Whatever, he mumbled. Mito smirked. Colin looked like she was trying very hard not to smile too much. And around them, for the first time all day, Shinjuku felt less like a place dragging itself out of ruin, and more like somewhere people might actually live again. After everyone had finished the meal Naruto helped prepare, the evening slowly wound down. One by one, the members of the student council were dropped off in the same car that had been driving them around all day. Rivals was barely awake by the time he left. Shirley thanked Naruto twice and still looked like she had more to say. Millie, of course, made one last comment about how useful it was to have friends with company cars before disappearing with a wave. Mito was one of the last to step out. She paused by the open door, one hand resting on the frame as she looked back at Naruto. I'm heading home from here, she said. Mom's probably waiting. Naruto nodded, understanding immediately. Yeah. Tell her I'll be back later. Mito's eyes flicked toward Colin, then back to him. There it was. That look. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Don't. Mito blinked, all innocence. Don't what? You know what? I don't know anything. She stepped out of the car, then leaned down slightly so she could look him in the eye. But if I did know something, I'd say don't be weird. Naruto gave her a flat stare. You saying that automatically makes it weird. Then don't make it weirder. Colin looked between them, trying not to smile. Naruto sighed through his nose. You are the worst little sister. And yet you'd be lost without me. I would be peaceful without you. Bored, Mito corrected. You'd be bored. Naruto opened his mouth, paused, then looked away. Maybe. Mito smiled, softer this time. Come home soon. His expression eased. I'll see you at home. She started to leave, then glanced back one more time. And don't come home too late. Mom will ask questions. Naruto groaned. Why does that sound like a threat? Because it is. Then she walked off, leaving Naruto muttering under his breath while Colin finally let herself laugh softly beside him. Naruto glanced at her. You're enjoying this. A little, Colin admitted. You shouldn't. It only encourages her. She seems like she doesn't need much encouragement. She really doesn't. The car pulled away again, leaving the two of them in a quieter kind of silence. By the time they reached the Statfeld residence, night had fully settled. The mansion rose beyond the gates, tall and elegant, with warm lights glowing in the windows. Calling it a house felt ridiculous. It looked more like the kind of place people visited because they had been invited, not because they lived there. Colin stepped out first. Naruto followed without thinking, walking with her up the path toward the front doors. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. You didn't have to walk me up. Naruto shoved his hands into his pockets and gave her an easy smile. Probably not. Colin looked at him. He shrugged. But I wanted to. Something about the simple honesty of it made her chest tighten. She looked ahead quickly, hoping the darkness hid the warmth creeping into her face. Naruto seemed not to notice. Or if he did, he was kind enough not to say anything. So, he asked after a moment, what did you think about today? Colin let out a small breath. Her gaze drifted toward the front doors, but her mind was still in Shinjuku. The children. The workers. The long tables. The way everyone had called for Naruto like he belonged to them, not as a superior or a benefactor, but as someone they trusted. It was, she searched for the right word. Different. Naruto smiled faintly. Good different or bad different? Good, she said. Then, after a pause, I think. He laughed softly. That sounds fair. Things usually get a little strange when I'm involved. Mito said you attract trouble. Mito says a lot of things. She seems right most of the time. Naruto placed a hand over his heart. Wow. You're taking her side already. Colin's mouth curved. She's convincing. She's dangerous. She's your sister. Exactly. Colin laughed again, quieter this time. Naruto watched her for a second, and his smile softened before he looked away. The night air settled around them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Colin said, you know, you're not what I thought you'd be. Naruto blinked and looked back at her. Oh, how so? She hesitated. Normally, she would have deflected. Said something vague. Kept the conversation safe. But after everything she had seen that day, lying felt wrong. It's the way you treat people, she said. The way you help them. Naruto's expression quieted. Colin kept going, her eyes holding his now. You're the son of Minato Namikaze. You could be like every other powerful person in Area 11. You could care about profit, reputation, appearances, all the things people like that usually care about. Her voice softened. But you don't. Not really. Naruto's smile faded into something more thoughtful. You actually care, she said. And you don't seem embarrassed by it. You don't act like kindness makes you weak. For a moment, Naruto said nothing. Then he looked away toward the dark street beyond the gates. I guess, he said slowly, it's because I know what it feels like. Colin frowned faintly. What does? Having nothing. That answer caught her off guard. Naruto's voice had gone quieter, not ashamed, just distant. My parents started with nothing. For the first few years, we were dirt poor. Dad was building everything from the ground up. Mom was recovering from, he paused, choosing his words carefully. A lot. And me. I was too little to understand most of it. He glanced back at her. But I remember enough. I remember the stress. The way Mom and Dad tried to make things feel normal even when they weren't. I remember Dad taking jobs nobody else wanted because they paid enough to keep us moving. I remember Mom pretending she wasn't tired. Colin listened without interrupting. Naruto's hand curled slightly in his pocket. When the company finally became something that could help people, I promised myself I would. Not because it looked good. Not because it was smart business. His eyes lifted to hers again. Because somebody should. Colin stared at him. There was no bitterness in his voice. No hatred. No speech about revenge. Just conviction. That, more than anything, struck her. So many people she knew were driven by loss. By anger. By duty. By the ghosts of those they had failed or lost. She understood that. She lived with it too. But Naruto moved because he wanted the world to be kinder than it had been. And somehow that felt even more dangerous than hatred. Colin's expression softened before she could stop it. You really are something else, she said. Naruto gave her that fox-like grin of his, the one that always seemed to catch her a little off guard. Is that good? Colin's heart skipped once. She looked away. Maybe. Maybe. Don't push your luck. Naruto laughed, warm and quiet. Before he could answer, the front door opened. A woman in simple maid clothing stepped out, a white apron tied neatly around her waist. She had dark brown hair, slightly tanned skin, and blue eyes that immediately made Naruto think of Colin. Not exactly the same, hers were older, softer, more tired, but close enough that the resemblance was unmistakable. Naruto knew at once this was Colin's mother. Mistress, you're home, the woman said, relief slipping into her voice. I'm so glad. I was beginning to worry. Then her gaze shifted to Naruto. The politeness remained, but her eyes sharpened just slightly, as though weighing him in a single glance. Naruto straightened and offered a respectful smile. Naruto Uzumaki, he said. It's nice to meet you. He dipped his head slightly. I'm a friend of Colin's from school. The woman's expression shifted at his name, and again at the mention of Ashford, but she still bowed politely. It is a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for escorting Mistress Colin home. No thanks needed, Naruto said easily. I was happy too. Colin looked between them, her expression tightening in a way Naruto could not fully read. For a second, the warmth of the moment thinned. Her mother lowered her gaze a little, hands folded in front of her apron. Naruto noticed. He also noticed the way Colin seemed to stiffen beside him, like she had suddenly remembered which version of herself she was supposed to be inside these gates. He did not comment on it. Instead, he turned back to Colin. I'll see you tomorrow. Colin blinked, caught by how gently he said it. Then she nodded. Yeah, tomorrow. Naruto smiled. Good night, Colin. Good night, Naruto. He took a few steps back toward the car, then paused as if remembering something. His voice came casually, too casually. Maybe next time we go out, it can just be the two of us. Colin's eyes widened. Her face heated instantly. What? Naruto only grinned, already stepping back toward the car. Think about it. He ducked into the vehicle before she could form a proper response. A moment later, the car pulled away, taillights fading beyond the gate. Colin stood there staring after it, her heart beating far too fast. Beside her, her mother spoke gently. Mistress Colin. Colin stiffened. Her mother hesitated, then continued softly. I'm glad you're making friends at school. Mr. Naruto seems very kind. Colin said nothing. After a quiet pause, her mother asked, is he only a friend? Or perhaps, something more? Colin's face, already warm, turned even redder. That's none of your business, she snapped too quickly. I'm going to my room. She brushed past her and stepped inside without looking back. But the sharpness of her own voice followed her. Behind her, Ms. Kazuki lowered her gaze. Yes, mistress, she said softly. Colin made it halfway up the staircase before guilt twisted in her chest. She stopped. Her hand tightened against the railing. For a moment, she considered going back down. Apologizing. Saying something. Anything. But pride and confusion tangled together, and she kept walking. Upstairs, alone with her thoughts, Colin closed the door to her room and leaned back against it. Naruto's words echoed in her mind. Maybe next time we go out, it can just be the two of us. Her heart gave another traitorous flutter. Colin pressed both hands to her face. Idiot, she muttered. She was not entirely sure whether she meant Naruto or herself. A few days later, Shirley and Colin were in the student council room putting together a small cat house for Arthur. At the moment, though, actual progress was slow. Colin, kneeling on the floor with Arthur in her lap, absent-mindedly scratched under the cat's chin while Shirley sorted through the pieces Millie had insisted were simple enough for children. They are not, Shirley muttered under her breath, frowning at the instructions. Before Colin could answer, the door slid open. Suzaku stepped in first carrying a flat wooden panel under one arm, with Mito just behind him holding a small box of nails, paint, and a folded blanket. Found the rest of it, Suzaku said. Mito set the box down on the table. And if Millie asks, no, we still don't know why a cat needs a house better furnished than most people's apartments. Shirley laughed. Colin glanced up just in time to catch Suzaku reaching for the box at the same moment Mito did. Their hands brushed. Both of them paused for the briefest second. Sorry, Suzaku said, pulling back slightly. No, it's fine, Mito answered, a little too quickly. For some reason, neither of them moved right away. Then Suzaku picked up the folded blanket instead. This goes inside, right? Mito nodded. Yeah, here. She stepped closer to help him unfold it, and the two of them ended up standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the half-built cat house, smoothing it out together with a quiet ease that felt strangely intimate for something so simple. Suzaku smiled faintly. You're good at this. Mito gave him a look from the corner of her eye. It's a blanket, Suzaku. He chuckled softly. I know. Still. That earned him the smallest hint of a smile. Colin noticed it. So did Shirley. And judging by the way Shirley suddenly looked very interested in not looking at them, she noticed a little too much. Mito cleared her throat and stepped back first. I'm going to check if we're missing anything else, she said. I'll help, Suzaku replied immediately. The two of them left together a moment later, and once the door closed behind them, the room felt oddly quieter. Shirley looked after them for a second, then turned back toward Colin. Well, she said. Colin raised a brow. What? Nothing, Shirley said much too innocently. Colin narrowed her eyes, but before she could press it, Shirley suddenly turned serious. Hey, can I ask you something important? Colin's attention shifted fully back to her. Huh, sure. What is it? Shirley had her back to Colin as she fiddled with one of the wooden panels, which somehow made what she said next sound even more suspicious. Colin, are you hiding something from us? Colin blinked. What are you talking about? She pulled Arthur a little closer, more out of habit than caution, though her hand did drift toward the pocket of her skirt. From inside, she drew out the small pink purse she always kept with her. Shirley turned halfway toward her. You can tell me, she said quickly. I promise I won't be too shocked. Or upset. Probably. Colin stared at her. That did not help. Shirley. The thing is, Shirley hesitated, then pushed on. I happened to see you before. At that, Colin's thumb pressed the hidden release on the purse. A small blade slipped out with a click. Arthur startled at once and squirmed in her lap. But Shirley, completely oblivious to how dangerous the last 5 seconds had almost become, blurted out. Are you interested in going out with Lulu? Colin just stared at her. Lulu. Shirley crossed her arms. The other day. Outside. I saw you two together. Her eyes narrowed accusingly. It looked like you were about to kiss him or something. What? Colin shot to her feet so fast Arthur nearly leapt out of her arms. I thought we settled this already. And what about what Millie said at the company and Shinjuku? But you never answered me back then. Shirley fired back. You never actually said who you wanted to get a kiss from. And Millie says things like that to tease people all the time. She took a step forward. So is something going on between you and Lulu? Because you can tell me. It is nothing like that. Colin insisted. Shirley looked at her for another second, then changed direction entirely. Then do you really like Naruto? That caught Colin far more off guard than the question about Lelouch had. Her mouth opened, then closed. Well, And that was the problem, wasn't it? Because she did not actually know how to answer that. She knew Naruto was her friend. She knew she admired him. She knew she respected everything he had done for the people in Shinjuku. And she knew, annoyingly, unhelpfully, and very clearly, that she was attracted to him. The memory of the shower flashed through her mind at the absolute worst possible moment. Then there was what he had said the night he walked her home. Maybe next time we go out, it can just be the two of us. He had not brought it up again. Which meant Colin had been left alone with it ever since. Wondering whether he had been joking. Wondering whether he meant it. Wondering, against her better judgment, if she would actually want him to ask again. Her silence stretched just a little too long. And Shirley's expression shifted immediately. To Shirley, that hesitation meant only one thing. Colin was definitely hiding something. Inside a royal transport carrier moving through the Tokyo settlement, Cornelia stood with Darlton, Guilford, and several Britannian soldiers as they reviewed a tactical map of the Saitama ghetto. The display showed the district already boxed in from every side, with nightmare units steadily moving into their designated positions. The Saitama ghetto is now completely surrounded, Darlton reported, turning from the monitor to face her directly. The Yamato Alliance's hideout is believed to be somewhere within this sector. Roughly half the people in the surrounding neighborhood are cooperating with them. If we proceed now. Cornelia did not look at him. What will the effect on production be? Darlton answered at once. Primary sector output should decrease by 0.2%. Cornelia gave a slight nod. So, within expectations. Her gaze shifted then, settling on the three men standing to her left in gray uniforms, each with his right hand resting over his heart. All of you were present during the Shinjuku disaster, Cornelia said. Is that correct? Yes, Your Highness, the man in the center answered. And we remain indebted to you for your mercy. That is not what I asked. He fell silent immediately. Cornelia turned her attention back to the tactical display, her expression unreadable. Tell me, she said coldly, do you think the conditions here resemble those of Shinjuku? None of them answered right away. A faint, dangerous smile touched Cornelia's lips. Zero is a criminal with a taste for spectacle, she said. So I have recreated the same conditions that existed in Shinjuku in order to draw him out. She folded her arms. If he is as overconfident as I suspect, then he will come here and try to kill me. The explanation was clearly meant for the benefit of everyone in the carrier. It had the intended effect. Viceroy, the same officer began carefully. You would truly place yourself in such danger. Cornelia looked at him then, and the weight of that look alone nearly silenced him again. What you fail to understand, she said, is that war is a struggle between pride and life. The man swallowed, but forced himself to continue. But Your Highness, what of Madara? He asked. We had confirmed reports of his presence in Shinjuku. If he appears here as well. Cornelia's expression hardened. Are you suggesting, she asked, her voice turning sharp enough to cut, that we abandon this operation because of one man? Of course not, Viceroy, the officer said at once, immediately retreating from the implication. Cornelia turned away from him with open disdain. Madara is an unknown factor, she said. If he appears, then we deal with him exactly as we will deal with Zero. Her eyes settled once more on the map of Saitama. We capture him. Back at Ashford, Suzaku made his way down the hall toward the student council room after finally finishing work for the day. For once, he was in a good mood. He found himself humming quietly under his breath, idly turning a small toy in his hand that he had picked up for Arthur earlier. He had spent the last little while helping Mito set up the cat's things, food bowls, a little sleeping spot, a few toys, and whatever else Millie had declared necessary for the student council's newest, official mascot. Mito had gone to look for something in storage, leaving Suzaku to carry the toy back on his own. He was almost at the door when a familiar voice called from behind him. Well, someone seems happy. Suzaku glanced back and saw Naruto catching up to him, hands in his pockets and an amused look already forming on his face. Naruto, Suzaku greeted, smiling slightly. How are you? Naruto shrugged. Can't complain. Finished dealing with some business and figured I'd swing back here, hang out with everyone for a bit. His eyes dropped to the little toy in Suzaku's hand. What's that? Suzaku lifted it a little. For Arthur. Mito and I were setting up his cat things. Naruto's brow rose. Mito and you. Suzaku immediately looked at him. It wasn't like that. Naruto blinked with exaggerated innocence. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was thinking it, Naruto admitted. Very different. Suzaku sighed. Naruto stepped closer, his grin widening just enough to look dangerous. So, you and my little sister. Alone. Setting up cat stuff. Suzaku's face tightened. Naruto. What? Naruto asked, voice casual. Too casual. I'm just making conversation. That is not conversation. That is interrogation. Naruto leaned in slightly, his blue eyes sharpening with a sudden, unmistakable big brother edge. Suzaku. Suzaku went still. Naruto's grin remained, but something beneath it turned protective. You know I love you like a brother, right? Suzaku stared at him. Why does that sound like a threat? Because I also love Mito like my sister. Because she is my sister. I know that. Good. Naruto patted Suzaku's shoulder, still smiling. Then we understand each other. Suzaku looked at the hand on his shoulder, then back at Naruto. Are you warning me? Naruto's expression stayed bright. I'm reminding you. Of what? That you're fast, Naruto said, but I'm faster. Suzaku closed his eyes for a moment. Naruto. What? I was helping her set up a cat bed. And I appreciate that. You're acting like I asked her to elope. Naruto paused. Then pointed at him. Do not put that sentence into the universe. Suzaku couldn't help it. He laughed softly despite himself. Naruto's protective glare cracked a little at the sound, though he still jabbed a finger lightly against Suzaku's chest. Seriously, though, Naruto said, quieter now. Mito's not someone you get to treat casually. Suzaku's smile faded slightly. I wouldn't. Naruto studied him for a moment. The hallway suddenly felt a little less playful. Suzaku met his eyes without looking away. I mean that, Suzaku said. Naruto held his gaze for another second, then nodded once. Good. Then the grin returned. Because mom would kill you first, and I'd be very upset if she stole my turn. Suzaku stared. You Namakazes are terrifying. Naruto looked deeply proud of that. Thank you. They continued walking side by side toward the council room. Suzaku cleared his throat, clearly eager to move on. I'm guessing Nina's already at Namikaze Corporation. Naruto nodded. Yeah, she's been doing really well, all things considered. Honestly, I'm still a little surprised Kaide offered her an internship so quickly, but Nina accepted, so I'm not going to complain. Suzaku's expression softened. That's good. He had done his best to give Nina space ever since learning about her fear. It wasn't much, but if keeping his distance helped her breathe easier, then he could do that. The two boys reached the council room just in time to hear raised voices from inside. Then the door slid open. Colin stood there, clearly in the middle of an argument. She only realized Naruto and Suzaku were there when she stopped dead and stared at them. Like I said, there is nothing between Lelouch and me. She snapped back toward the room. Naruto's brow lifted. There's nothing between Lelouch and you. He repeated. Then a grin spread across his face. Well, I guess that's a relief. Colin's face turned red almost instantly. For 1 second, she just stared at him, clearly trying to figure out how much he had heard and whether she could still salvage any dignity from this. If it had only been Suzaku standing there, she might have brushed past it. Naruto was another problem entirely. It's not. Colin started, then stopped herself, jaw tightening. That's not what I meant. Naruto's grin softened into something warmer. Sure. Colin narrowed her eyes. Don't say it like that. Like what? Like you're enjoying this. I am enjoying this a little. Naruto. He raised both hands. Okay, okay. Suzaku glanced past her into the room. Lelouch. He echoed, confused. Inside, Shirley was holding Arthur in her arms, looking like she was seconds away from crying. Suzaku frowned slightly. Lelouch really is hopeless with women. Colin got herself under control with visible effort. It's nothing, she said tightly. Then she turned back toward Shirley one last time. Anyway, that's how it is. With that, she walked off down the hall. Naruto watched her go, humming thoughtfully under his breath. Then he gave Suzaku a quick look. You've got this, right? Suzaku immediately disliked that look. Wait. Naruto grinned and went after Colin. Naruto. No response. Suzaku stood there for a moment, abandoned in front of the council room, then slowly looked inside at Shirley. Shirley looked miserable. Arthur looked annoyed. Suzaku silently cursed both Lelouch and Naruto. He stepped into the room and decided the simplest place to start was with an easy question. Where's Lelouch? That turned out to be the wrong one. I don't know where he is, Shirley snapped, and I don't care. Suzaku blinked. The tears gathering in the corners of her eyes made it obvious there was far more going on than what he had walked in on. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I see. He did not see. Not even a little. Before he could think of anything useful, another voice called from down the hall. Suzaku. He turned. Mito was walking toward them, holding a small bag of cat supplies in one hand. Apparently, she had found whatever she had gone looking for. The moment she saw Shirley's face, her expression changed. What happened? Shirley looked away quickly, embarrassed to be caught crying. It's nothing. Mito clearly didn't believe that for a second. She also didn't push. Instead, she stepped into the room, set the bag down near Arthur's new things, and rested a gentle hand on Shirley's shoulder. Come on, Mito said quietly. Sit down before you fall over from all that crying and pretending you're not. That earned the smallest, watery huff from Shirley, but she let Mito guide her toward one of the chairs. Suzaku watched the whole thing with visible relief. Mito glanced up at him. Well. Suzaku blinked. Well what? You're just standing there. I was thinking. That explains why nothing useful has happened yet. Despite the situation, Suzaku nearly smiled. He stepped further inside and rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not really good at this sort of thing. Mito looked at him for a second. Then, to his surprise, her expression softened. You're better at it than you think. Suzaku stared at her, caught slightly off guard by how gently she said it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Shirley made a small, offended sound from the chair. Could you two maybe not have a moment while I'm miserable? Mito immediately straightened. We're not having a moment. Suzaku looked away at once. Right. No. Definitely not. Shirley gave them both a very suspicious look, though thankfully she seemed too upset to press further. Mito crouched down in front of her instead. Do you want to talk about it? Shirley hesitated, then shook her head. Not really. Okay. Mito nodded once. Then we can just sit here until you decide whether you hate Lelouch, Colin, or life in general. That got another weak laugh out of Shirley. Suzaku let out a quiet breath, relieved that Mito had managed in under a minute what he definitely would not have. When Mito stood back up, he leaned slightly closer and lowered his voice. Thanks. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. For what? For saving me. A tiny smile tugged at her mouth. You looked like you were about to drown. Suzaku smiled too, faint but real. Probably. Their eyes met for a second longer than either of them meant for it to. Then Mito looked away first, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You still owe me for that. Suzaku blinked. Oh you? Yes. Her voice went lighter, almost teasing. I had to rescue you socially. That's worth something. Suzaku's smile widened just a little. Then I guess I'll have to repay you. Mito folded her arms, though the faint color touching her cheeks made the gesture lose some of its bite. I'll be keeping track. Shirley, still sitting there with Arthur in her lap, looked between the two of them and sniffed. You are definitely having a moment. This time, neither of them answered fast enough to deny it properly. It didn't take Naruto long to catch up with Colin, though it was obvious from the way she carried herself that she didn't really want to talk about what had just happened in the council room. He wanted to ask about something else too, about the woman he had seen with her the other night, but one look at Colin's face told him that was definitely not the time. For a few seconds, they just walked in silence. Then Colin finally spoke. It was nothing. Naruto glanced at her. What was? Colin folded her arms a little tighter. What Shirley was saying back there, she said. About me and Lelouch. It's nothing. There's nothing going on between us. She was just being paranoid. Or something. She wasn't even sure why she was explaining herself. She didn't have to. And yet, for some reason, she had not wanted Naruto leaving that room with the wrong idea in his head. Naruto looked at her for a second, then smiled. You don't have to explain anything to me. Colin's steps slowed slightly. Naruto's smile softened. Besides, he added, I believe you. That caught her off guard. The certainty in the way he said it made something in her chest ease before she could stop it, and the smile she gave him back was smaller than his, but no less real. I know, but still, she began, only to trail off again. There was something else she wanted to ask. Something she had wanted to ask ever since the night he walked her home. But the second she thought about actually saying it, her confidence wavered. Naruto. Colin started quietly. She hesitated. Then looked away. Never mind. Naruto gave her a questioning look, clearly not buying that at all, and he was just about to press her on it when his phone went off. He pulled it out and answered. Hello, Reika. Naruto blinked once. How did you even get this number? Colin's shoulders stiffened almost instantly at the mention of that girl's name, and though she tried not to show it, her attention locked completely onto him. Naruto listened for a few seconds. Then his expression changed. What? He said sharply. All right. Yeah. Thanks. He ended the call and immediately started pulling something up on his phone. Colin watched him. What was that about? Naruto didn't answer right away. He found the broadcast, turned the screen toward himself, and the voice of a news reporter immediately came through the speaker. Military authorities have reported that they have surrounded the Saitama Ghetto, a known hiding place for terrorist elements. Viceroy Cornelia is also confirmed to be on the scene, and access to the area has been strictly restricted. Reports indicate that a full-scale assault may begin within 2 hours. Naruto cut the feed. The silence after it felt heavier than the broadcast itself. Colin's hands had clenched into fists without her noticing. Naruto looked grim. So that's what she meant, he muttered. Colin turned to him sharply. What are you talking about? Naruto let out a breath through his nose, already thinking too fast for his own good. I never told you who met with my family after Suzaku joined the student council, did I? He asked, though it was clear from the way he said it that he wasn't really expecting an answer. Cornelia had a meeting with my dad. Colin's eyes widened. Naruto's expression stayed dark. At the end of it, she told him Namikaze Corporation might be given the chance to help rebuild another ghetto in a few days. He glanced once more at the now dark screen of his phone. Guess this is what she meant. For a second, neither of them said anything. Then Naruto looked away, his thoughts already moving elsewhere. And for the briefest moment, another image rose in his mind. The hidden hangar beneath Namikaze Corporation was quiet except for the low hum of machines. Naruto stood beside Minato beneath pale white lights, staring up at the frame in front of him. Black and crimson armor gleamed from the shadows. Hard, angular plating. Folded flight units along the back. A narrow, predatory head. It did not look like the Sutherlands he had seen on the news. It did not look like something mass-produced, or disposable, or simple. It looked personal. Dangerous. Waiting. Naruto's throat felt dry. What is it? Minato stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression calm but grave. The Izanagi. Naruto's eyes did not leave the nightmare. The name sat heavy in the air. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he asked, quieter, that one's mine. Minato nodded. If the day ever comes when you have no choice. Naruto looked at him then. There was something in Minato's face that made the answer feel less like a gift and more like an apology. Naruto looked back at the black and crimson machine. He let out a slow breath. I really hope that day takes a while. Minato's silence said enough. Naruto blinked, the memory vanishing as quickly as it had come. I really didn't think I was gonna have to use the Izanagi this soon. Colin was still watching him, trying to read something from his expression, but he gave her nothing clear to hold on to. Just a small, distracted shake of his head. And here I thought I was done with work for the day, he muttered, humorless. Then he looked back at her, his expression smoothing out just enough to keep her from asking the next question too quickly. I'll see you later, Colin. Before she could stop him or ask what exactly that meant, Naruto had already turned and started back down the hall. Colin watched him go, unease settling in her stomach. Whatever was happening in Saitama, it was bad. That much was obvious. And somewhere inside her, a part of her was already trying to figure out what she or the resistance could do about it. But with Cornelia surrounding the area herself, getting in would be nearly impossible. And if anyone did manage it, they would likely be walking straight into a trap. Which meant, for the moment, Colin was left with the one thing she hated most. Waiting. Waiting for more information. Waiting to hear what happened next. And hating every second of it. After Naruto went after Colin, Suzaku was left standing in the student council room with Shirley and Mito in a silence that felt far heavier than it should have. Shirley still had Arthur in her arms, though at this point the cat was doing more to comfort her than anyone else had managed so far. Mito stood a little off to the side with her arms folded, watching the orange-haired girl with a look that had softened from annoyance into concern. Suzaku, meanwhile, was doing his best to figure out what exactly one was supposed to say in this sort of situation. He was not doing very well. At length, Shirley finally looked down and spoke in a quieter voice. I really do like him. Suzaku blinked. Lelouch. Shirley gave him a look that somehow managed to be embarrassed and offended at the same time. Who else would I mean? Right. Sorry. Mito let out the faintest sigh through her nose, but she didn't interrupt. Suzaku rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Well, he began, trying to sound helpful. That doesn't necessarily mean things are hopeless. Shirley looked up at him with obvious misery. Suzaku, you don't understand. Lelouch never says what he's actually thinking. She held Arthur a little closer. And every time I think maybe I'm getting somewhere, something weird happens, or he disappears, or Colin's there, or... She stopped herself and looked away, frustrated. Suzaku frowned slightly. He knew Lelouch could be difficult. That part was hardly new. But the way Shirley said it made it sound less like normal confusion and more like she was genuinely hurting over it. Mito clearly noticed the same thing. You don't have to figure everything out tonight, she said, her voice gentler than usual. You're allowed to be upset without deciding what it all means right away. Shirley managed a small laugh at that. I know. It's just, she glanced toward Suzaku again. I feel stupid. Suzaku's expression softened. You're not stupid. Mito nodded once. Not even a little. That seemed to steady Shirley enough that she took a breath and let it out more evenly. Suzaku, deciding that now was the moment to do something useful, looked toward the phone on the desk. Well, he said, as though this were the most natural thing in the world, we could always ask him. Both girls looked at him. Shirley's eyes widened in horror. Mito's narrowed immediately. Suzaku, she said. But he was already moving. It's better than guessing, he said, reaching for the club phone. If I just ask Lelouch directly what he thinks of you, then... Suzaku, no. He picked up the receiver. Shirley made a strangled sound. Mito moved faster. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and grabbed for the phone just as Suzaku started dialing. Give me that. Suzaku turned slightly, keeping it out of reach on instinct more than intention. It'll be fine. It will absolutely not be fine, Mito shot back, reaching again. Do not call him. Shirley just stared at the two of them in disbelief. Suzaku. I'm helping. No, you're making this worse. Mito caught his wrist. Suzaku tried to pull back without yanking hard enough to actually hurt her. Wait. No. What followed was less a struggle and more a complete collapse of coordination. Mito pulled. Suzaku shifted to keep hold of the receiver. Mito reached higher. Suzaku stepped backward. And the next thing either of them knew, their balance was gone. They tumbled sideways onto the couch in a tangle of limbs, Suzaku half over her, the phone slipping from his grip and landing somewhere on the cushions beside them. Then everything stopped. Their faces were inches apart. Mito still had one hand twisted in the front of his shirt. Suzaku's palm was braced against the couch near her shoulder. Neither of them moved. For one long second, Mito forgot how to breathe. Suzaku's thoughts scattered completely. He was close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. Close enough to see the exact shade in her eyes. Close enough that if either of them moved even a little, Shirley stood a few feet away, Arthur still in her arms, too stunned to say a single word. Then the door slid open. Naruto stepped in, already talking before he fully processed what he was seeing. Hey, He stopped. His eyes went from Suzaku to Mito. To the fact that Suzaku was half on top of his sister. And for one very dangerous moment, Naruto's entire expression changed. His posture stiffened. His eyes sharpened. The room felt colder. Suzaku, he said. It was only one word. But it carried a very specific kind of warning. The kind of tone that belonged less to Naruto the friend and more to Naruto the older brother. Suzaku went pale so fast it was almost impressive. Mito, on the other hand, came back to herself first. It is not what it looks like, she said immediately. Naruto's gaze did not leave Suzaku. That's a pretty bad sentence to lead with. Suzaku finally lurched backward off the couch so quickly he nearly fell a second time. I was trying to stop him, Mito added, sitting up and straightening her clothes with what dignity she could salvage. Then she looked at Naruto and frowned. And stopped glaring at him like that. That made Naruto pause. Actually pause. Then he blinked once, realization catching up with the instinct that had fired first. Right. He still had somewhere he needed to be. And this, whatever this was clearly not the emergency his first reaction had decided it was. Naruto exhaled through his nose and dragged a hand down his face. Okay, he muttered. Right. Not dealing with that right now. Shirley, still stunned, looked between all three of them. You all have a very strange dynamic. Naruto pointed at Suzaku. We are absolutely coming back to this. Suzaku looked like he wanted the floor to open up. Mito crossed her arms. No, you're not. Naruto opened his mouth to argue. Then seemed to remember why he had come back in the first place. Damn it. He straightened a little and looked at the three of them properly. Something came up. I have to go. That wiped most of the embarrassment out of the room at once. Mito's expression shifted first. It's nothing serious, is it? Probably, Naruto said honestly. But it's nothing I shouldn't be able to handle. Then he looked at his sister. Mito, can you tell mom and dad for me? She nodded once. Yeah, I'll let them know. Suzaku had regained just enough self-control to speak normally again. You're sure you'll be fine? Naruto gave him a look that was only half serious now. Yeah, I should be. Then his eyes flicked once more between Suzaku and Mito, and despite himself, the big brother suspicion tried to creep back in. Mito caught it instantly. Go, she said flatly. Naruto let out a quiet huff of laughter. Right, I'm going. He stepped back toward the door. I'll see you all tomorrow. And then he was gone again. The room fell silent. Shirley slowly lowered herself into one of the chairs with Arthur still in her lap and looked from Suzaku to Mito and back again. So, she said at last, I'm not actually sure I'm the one having the worst night anymore. Suzaku rubbed the back of his neck, still red around the ears. So, he said. Mito looked away, though the faint color still on her face ruined any hope of pretending she was entirely unaffected. So, she echoed. And with Arthur purring obliviously in Shirley's lap, the three of them sat there in the aftermath of one emotional disaster, one accidental near confession, and one very protective older brother, none of them quite sure what to say next. Lelouch stood in his room, methodically placing the military uniform he had taken from the Shinjuku ghetto into a suitcase while CC lounged across his bed as if none of this had anything to do with her. Not long ago, he had learned of Cornelia's plan for the Saitama ghetto. It was an obvious trap. A stage. A challenge thrown out openly for Zero to answer. Cornelia had recreated the same kind of conditions that existed in Shinjuku because she expected him to appear, and Lelouch knew that. He understood perfectly well that the entire operation was bait meant to drag him into the open. He was going anyway. Because even a trap could be turned around if the one walking into it understood the board better than the one who set it. And more than that, this gave him something he could not ignore. A chance to get close to Cornelia. A chance to force answers out of her about his mother's murder. And after that, he would kill her. His focus on that goal was so complete that he had ignored the call from the student council room altogether. CC, from where she lay on the bed, watched him without much visible interest, though that did not mean she was not thinking. Lelouch's motivations were easy enough to understand on the surface. He spoke of avenging his mother. He spoke of destroying Britannia. He spoke of building a gentler world for Nunnally. But to CC, those convictions all carried the same familiar smell. Resolve. Obsession. The kind that drove people forward until it killed them. And as long as Lelouch still had a part to play in their contract, she had no intention of letting him die before he fulfilled it. If that's true, Lelouch said suddenly, snapping the suitcase shut with enough force to make the sound crack through the room, then what happens to Nunnally? He straightened and turned slightly, violet eyes cold with resolve. Should I just abandon my sister because she's weak? Frail? Helpless? His voice sharpened. I refuse to accept a world like that. He lifted the suitcase. I'll destroy that kind of world myself. For a brief moment, CC simply looked at him. There was something noble in it. Twisted, maybe. Dangerous, certainly. But noble all the same. She had seen people cling to ideals before. She had watched them dream of changing the world, only to die long before they ever came close. Lelouch was not the first to speak like this. And unless she intervened, he might become just another corpse added to that long line. CC rose from the bed and stepped in front of the door, cutting off his path. In one smooth motion, she drew a gun and leveled it at him. You can't go, Lelouch, she said flatly. You still have a role to play in our bargain. I won't let you die before that. Lelouch stopped. Then, instead of reacting with alarm, he looked at her almost calmly. You do realize, he said, that what you're saying and what you're doing contradict each other. CC's expression didn't shift. I'm not going to kill you, she said. I'll just shoot you in the leg and make sure you stay put. The gun never wavered. Lelouch studied her for half a second. Then a slow, confident smirk touched his mouth. Now I understand. That drew the faintest narrowing of her eyes. You can't use Geass yourself, can you? It was half question, half declaration. And the tiniest catch in her breath told him he was right. I'm not surprised, Lelouch went on. You wouldn't need me if you could simply do it yourself. With that, he drew a gun of his own and pointed it at her. CC didn't even blink. Do you really think you can threaten me with a gun? Yes, Lelouch said. And then, deliberately, he turned the barrel away from her and pressed it to his own head. Until I met you, Lelouch said quietly, I was already dead. His voice lost none of its certainty. I was just a corpse pretending to live. Day after day, hiding behind a false life. Smiling when I had to. Playing along. Existing, but never doing anything real. His finger settled near the trigger. All I did was drift. Like some kind of living dead thing, slowly rotting from the inside. His eyes locked onto hers. If I have to go back to that, his smile became sharper, emptier. Then I'd rather die. CC stared at him. And Lelouch held the bluff with perfect confidence, certain he had understood the truth of her. If she really needed him to fulfill her end of their bargain, then she could not let him risk his own life. Which meant she would yield. For the first time since he had known her, real emotion cracked through her stillness. Stop it. The word came out sharper than either of them expected. Her arm dropped. So did his. CC looked away for a moment, a strange, sad little smile touching her face. So that's it, she murmured. A life without meaning. Then she looked back at him, and by then her expression had mostly returned to its usual detached calm. Fine, she said. If you feel that strongly about it, I won't stop you. Lelouch allowed himself the smallest flicker of satisfaction. He had read the situation correctly. Again. With his path clear, he stepped past her and left the room without another word. The door closed behind him. CC remained still for a few seconds after he was gone. Then she crossed back to the bed and let herself fall onto it, staring up at the ceiling in silence. She had no illusions about what was coming. Lelouch was brilliant. Exceptional, even. But brilliance did not make him experienced. It did not make him immune to panic, chaos, or the ugly unpredictability of real battle. Sooner or later, he was going to lose control of the situation. And when that happened, he would need help. Besides, there was something else now. Something that had caught her attention. Something she wanted to see with her own eyes. And she had a feeling that if she went to the Saitama ghetto, she would. The 2-hour deadline over the Saitama ghetto was almost gone. Britannia had already sealed the district completely. Every road in and out was blocked by armored vehicles and infantry checkpoints. Sutherland stood in formation at key intersections, their cameras sweeping across ruined apartment blocks and cracked streets. Tanks rolled into place with cold mechanical patience, while helicopters circled overhead and carrier craft hung above the district like vultures waiting for the first body to drop. Inside the ghetto, panic had already taken root. Japanese residents were being herded into open streets at gunpoint. Families clung to one another. Mothers shielded children behind their bodies. Old men lowered their heads and said nothing, because they knew exactly what this was. No one believed this was only about arresting terrorists. The scattered gunshots echoing from deeper inside Saitama made that painfully clear. Inside the Royal Transport Carrier, Cornelia Lee Britannia watched the final troop movements unfold across her tactical monitors. Darlton stood nearby, his expression grim and disciplined. We have finished sweeping away the suspected leaders, he reported. All units are in position. Cornelia's eyes remained fixed on the map. Then it is almost time. No one misunderstood her meaning. Darlton turned toward the communications officer and gave the order. Attention all forces. Commence eradication of the Saitama ghetto. The command fell like a blade. And hell followed. Britannian soldiers surged into the district. Sutherlands advanced through broken streets, their heavy footsteps shaking loose dust from already damaged buildings. Tanks opened fire down narrow roads. Aircraft circled above, flooding the streets with spotlights as soldiers dragged screaming civilians from their homes. Lelouch had slipped into the ghetto earlier. Now he watched the slaughter unfold from cover, his expression darkening with cold disgust. No matter who sat on the throne, Britannia always chose the same answer. Destroy. Dominate. Leave someone else to bury the dead. Behind him, the approaching sound of a Sutherland barely drew his attention. He was already prepared. That machine would serve him soon enough. Elsewhere in the ghetto, standing atop the remains of a cracked apartment building, Naruto listened. Not as Naruto. Not here. Today, he wore Madara's face. The mask hid his expression, but not the tension in his shoulders as the sounds of the district rose around him. Gunfire. Screams. Engines. The grinding collapse of old concrete. A child crying somewhere below. Naruto's hands curled slowly at his sides. When he opened his eyes beneath the mask, the Sharingan spun to life. 3 Tomo rotated sharply in both eyes. A second later, smoke burst around him. Dozens of shadow clones appeared across the rooftop, nearly 50 in all, each wearing the same cloak, the same mask, the same silent fury. You know what to do, Naruto said. The clones waited. Civilians first. Get them out of the line of fire. Move them somewhere defensible. If soldiers get in the way. His voice lowered. Stop them. The clones vanished in blurs of speed. A low, irritated growl rolled through his mind. You're wasting time, the QB rumbled. Forget the machine. Forget the mask. Let me out and I'll tear through all of them. Naruto ignored the worst of the tone and reached toward the red crystal hanging from his wrist. Maybe, he muttered, pushing chakra into it. But this is the first real test. If the Izanagi performs the way Dad said it would, I need to know. You cling to toys while humans slaughter each other below you. Naruto's jaw tightened. Then I guess I'd better make the toy count. Crimson light flashed. The Izanagi materialized in the street below. The black and crimson nightmare stood tall and lethal amid the broken buildings, red lines across its armor glowing like veins as its systems awakened. Its silhouette was sharper than most Britannian frames, leaner, more predatory. Not a mass-produced weapon. Naruto dropped from the rooftop and landed on the open cockpit hatch before vaulting inside. The machine came alive around him. Systems lit one after another. Chakra synchronization engaged. Control feedback stabilized. Naruto placed his hands on the controls and exhaled. He switched the IFF signature active. If Cornelia wanted a target, he would give her one. Inside Cornelia's carrier, officers were already tracking resistance cells moving with stolen Sutherlands. The battlefield had fallen into exactly the kind of chaos Cornelia expected. Then a new icon appeared on the tactical display. Enemy. Unknown unit. Every eye on the bridge shifted toward it. Cornelia's gaze sharpened. Report. Darlton scanned the incoming data. It doesn't match any nightmare frame in our database. The only identification we have is the designation it's broadcasting. Cornelia did not look away from the screen. And that is. Darlton paused. The Izanagi. Cornelia's eyes narrowed. A custom frame. Another officer suddenly turned from his station. Viceroy. We're receiving multiple sightings of the masked figure Madara throughout the ghetto. Images began appearing across several monitors. Madara on a rooftop, lifting a child out of a collapsing home. Madara in an alley, disarming soldiers before they could fire. Madara dragging civilians through smoke. Madara standing between a squad and a group of terrified residents. One officer stared at the feeds in disbelief. How is that possible? Cornelia's expression hardened. Focus on the unknown nightmare. The copies are a complication. The original is most likely inside the Izanagi. Not far away, Lelouch also noticed the new IFF signature. His eyes narrowed. A new variable. Unexpected. Dangerous. It could have been a part of Cornelia's trap. Or it could have been Madara inserting himself into the battlefield again, just as he had done before. Either way, it changed the board. P4, Lelouch ordered into his communicator, move 100 meters southeast and observe the unknown unit. Stay out of sight. Do not engage. I only want to know how it responds to Britannian contact. Understood, came the reply. The first 4 Sutherlands reached the Izanagi moments later. They surrounded the black and crimson frame at a cautious distance, rifles raised. By order of Viceroy Cornelia, surrender at once. One pilot barked over open comms. Refuse and we will open fire. The Izanagi did not respond. The next second, 6 dark lines snapped through the air. The Sutherland pilots barely registered the movement before their machines froze. Then their ejection systems triggered simultaneously. As the pilots launched free, all 4 Sutherlands came apart at once, arms, legs, and heads sheared cleanly away from the torsos. The Izanagi stood behind them. Its wrist-mounted MVS daggers had already retracted. Inside Cornelia's carrier, silence held for one stunned moment. Then the battlefield feed replayed the attack frame by frame. The daggers had moved faster than most of the monitoring systems could follow. Cornelia leaned forward slightly. Interesting, she said. Send more. P4, the resistance pilot Lelouch had sent, watched from nearby with his mouth half open. That's insane. Against orders, he moved his stolen Sutherland closer. P4, Lelouch snapped through the communicator, "What are you doing? I told you to stay back." "Relax," the man said. "That thing just ripped apart 4 Britannian machines in one move. He's obviously on our side." He opened the cockpit hatch and stood up where the Izanagi could see him. "Hey! Over here. We're with." A Harishan dagger slammed into the street inches from his cockpit. P4 froze. The Izanagi stood motionless a short distance away, one arm lowered from the throw. Madara's voice came through the external speakers, flat and cold. "I don't remember saying I trusted you." The pilot swallowed. "We're fighting Britannia. That tells me nothing. We're not your enemy. For all I know, you're bait." More Britannian units began moving toward their position. "Leave," Madara ordered. "You're in the way." "What? I don't take orders from." A second dagger flashed past and severed the stolen Sutherland's arm at the shoulder. The pilot shouted in alarm. "Now," Madara said. That was enough. P4 fled. Lelouch watched the exchange in silence, then exhaled through his nose. "Good. Let Madara draw attention." The next wave hit harder. 10 Sutherlands opened fire from multiple angles, trying to bury the Izanagi beneath sheer volume. Bullets tore through walls. Shells shattered stone. Dust exploded across the narrow street as the Britannian units advanced in coordinated formation. The Izanagi moved. Not in one direction. In all of them. Black and crimson afterimages cut between the fire as Naruto pushed the machine harder, testing how it responded to his chakra, how quickly its limbs translated intent into motion, how well Minato's systems held under stress. The answer was almost frightening. The frame moved like an extension of him. A grin touched Naruto's mouth behind the mask. "Dad really undersold this thing." "You sound impressed," the QB rumbled. "I am. You still don't need it." 2 Sutherlands lunged in close, trying to pin him from opposite sides. The Izanagi's palm emitter flared. Chakra spiraled into a violent sphere. Rasengan. The first Sutherland's torso collapsed inward under the impact, armor folding around the blast before the machine was hurled backward into a wall. The Izanagi pivoted at once, drove a Kodachi through the second unit's knee joint, then kicked it sideways into a third machine hard enough to send both crashing through rubble. The remaining pilots tightened formation. Naruto flicked 2 Harishan daggers into opposite buildings. Then the Izanagi vanished. One instant it stood in the center of the formation. The next, it was above them. A flash. Then behind them. Another flash. Then inside their circle. 3 Sutherlands went down before their pilots could even track the movement. Naruto's eyes burned. For a split second, the tomo in his Sharingan stretched. Not fully. Not yet. But enough that the pattern sharpened into something darker, something jagged and spiraling beneath the red glow. The Mangekyo flickered. Naruto's breath caught. A street. A younger sky. A girl walking beside him. A laugh. A gunshot. Blood on a school uniform. His grip tightened around the controls. The world narrowed. A squad of Britannian infantry rounded a corner below, chasing a group of civilians into an alley. One soldier raised his rifle toward an old man carrying a child. Naruto's Mangekyo flashed again. Space twisted. The soldier disappeared from the waist up. The rest of him collapsed before the others even understood what had happened. The squad froze. What the hell? Madara appeared at street level in a blur, one of Naruto's clones standing between the civilians and the soldiers. Another soldier screamed and opened fire. The bullets passed through the masked figure as if he were smoke. For one terrible second, Naruto's eye pulsed again with that spiraling pattern. The soldier's rifle warped inward, swallowed by a small distortion of space. Then his arm followed. He vanished screaming into nothing. The remaining soldiers stumbled back. Monster. That word hit Naruto harder than the gunfire. Monster. Another flash. A girl's body in his arms. Britannian soldiers laughing. You'll be next if you keep hanging around 11 trash. Naruto's breath turned ragged. Then the Izanagi moved from above. The black and crimson nightmare landed between the civilians and the soldiers with enough force to crack the street. Its arm swept out, and a wind-charged blade of chakra cut through the remaining squad's weapons, armor, and bodies in one brutal arc. The civilians screamed. But they were alive. A clone appeared beside them, voice low and urgent. Run. This way. They ran. Inside the Izanagi, Naruto's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He had killed them. Not just disabled them. Killed them. The Kyuubi's voice was quieter now. There it is. Naruto did not answer. That anger. That is the part of you they made. Shut up. Why? Because I'm wrong. Naruto's Mangekyo flickered again, then settled back into the three-tomo Sharingan. I said shut up. The Britannian assault continued. More units moved in. More soldiers poured through the district. And now Naruto stopped holding back. A Sutherland tried to retreat after seeing the unknown unit tear through its formation. The Izanagi hurled a marked dagger into its back. Flash. Naruto appeared above it and drove both Kodachi down through the shoulder joints. The machine collapsed. The cockpit ejected, but the pilot came down near a squad of infantry who were firing into an apartment block. Naruto saw flashes in the windows. Civilians. Children. His eyes sharpened again. The Mangekyo pattern pulsed. For a breath, the cockpit screens blurred, replaced by the memory of a hand going limp in his. Naruto's voice dropped into something cold. No. The Izanagi raised its left arm. Space twisted at the center of the infantry squad. The soldiers screamed as the distortion pulled weapons, helmets, and bodies inward. Two vanished completely into the warped point before it collapsed on itself, leaving nothing but shattered pavement and a storm of dust. The rest broke and ran. Naruto did not chase them. Not until one of them turned and threw a grenade toward the apartment entrance. The Izanagi vanished, reappeared, caught the grenade in one armored hand, and threw it back. The explosion swallowed the fleeing soldier and half the street behind him. Inside Cornelia's carrier, alarms were piling over one another. Viceroy, we're losing infantry squads in Sector 7. Multiple nightmare losses in Sector 9. Unknown spatial distortion detected near target unit. Civilians are escaping through the eastern alleys. Cornelia's eyes narrowed. Spatial distortion. Darlton looked grim. The reports are inconsistent. Some soldiers claim Madara cannot be hit. Others are reporting missing weapons, missing personnel, and localized warping around the masked figure. Cornelia's face hardened. So the rumors from Shinjuku were not exaggerated. Guilford, standing nearby, watched another feed show the Izanagi carving through 3 Sutherlands in succession. This is no ordinary pilot. No, Cornelia said. It is not. Below, the battle escalated. 5 Sutherlands attempted to coordinate with infantry support, forcing civilians into a central avenue where tanks had taken position. The trap would have worked on normal resistance fighters. It did not work on Naruto. A dozen clones appeared along the rooftops. Down. One shouted to the civilians. They dropped. The clones moved as one. Some threw smoke bombs. Others hurled marked daggers. 2 clones appeared directly beside Britannian soldiers, grabbed them, and vanished again, teleporting them high above the rooftops before releasing them into empty air. The Izanagi came next. It flashed between marked points in rapid succession, each movement leaving only a red-black blur behind. Its blades carved through tank treads. Its MVS daggers severed nightmare limbs. Its palm emitters formed smaller chakra bursts that punched through armor without wasting motion. A Britannian officer tried to rally the infantry. Stand your ground. It's one machine. The Izanagi turned toward him. The officer saw the single red eye glowing from within the Nightmare's cockpit feed. Not the machine's camera. The pilot's eye. For one impossible moment, the officer felt as if he were looking directly into something ancient and wounded. The Mangekyo flared. Space folded around him. He disappeared without a sound. The soldiers near him broke. Naruto inhaled sharply, one hand briefly leaving the controls to press against his eye. Pain stabbed behind it. Not enough to stop him. Enough to warn him. The Kyuubi growled. That eye of yours is bleeding. Naruto looked down. A thin line of blood had begun trailing from beneath the mask near his left eye. He wiped it away with the back of his glove. Still works. So do I. I'm aware. Then stop pretending you can do this cleanly. Naruto's gaze hardened. I'm not trying to do it cleanly. Another shell struck near a line of fleeing civilians. A little boy fell. A Britannian soldier raised his rifle. Naruto moved before the trigger could be pulled. The Izanagi's hand closed around the soldier and crushed the weapon against his chest. The clone beside the child scooped him up and disappeared with him. The soldier choked, pinned in the nightmare's grip. Naruto stared down at him through the Izanagi's camera. Another flash. Another street. A girl smiling at him. Blood spreading under his hands. The soldier whimpered. Please. Naruto's eye burned. For a second, the red chakra of the Kyuubi crawled over the inside of the cockpit like steam. Then Naruto released the soldier. The man dropped to the ground, gasping. Naruto's voice came over the speaker, low and shaking with controlled fury. Run. The soldier did. Cornelia's forces began falling into disarray. The bridge leading deeper into the ghetto suddenly erupted in explosions from end to end, taking several Britannian units with it. Smoke and flame rolled over the street, cutting off one of the major advance routes. Cornelia did not flinch. That is enough, she said. Order all troops to fall back. We have learned what we needed. Several officers protested at once. Fall back. We can still engage. There are civilians escaping. Cornelia's glare silenced them. There is no value in throwing away more units. Withdraw them. Darlton relayed the order. Lelouch, still in his stolen Sutherland, heard the retreat command and smiled thinly. Perfect. If he blended into the withdrawal, he could place himself close enough to Cornelia. Despite Madara's interference, the core of his plan remained intact. He could still make this work. He would still win. In the carrier, Cornelia was thinking much the same. Zero is close, she said. Of that I am certain. Then she turned toward Guilford. The battlefield with Madara is yours. Guilford bowed immediately. It will be my honor. 3 Gloucesters moved out to intercept the Izanagi, 2 standard frames and Guilford's darker machine leading them. Naruto saw them coming through the smoke. The corners of his mouth lifted faintly. Now this should be fun. Or you could let me destroy them, the Kyuubi muttered. I'm multitasking. The Gloucesters attacked without hesitation. Their lances came first. The Izanagi slipped between the first 2 thrusts, caught Guilford's spear on one reinforced forearm, then launched both MVS daggers from the other. The 2 accompanying Gloucesters jerked back just in time to avoid having their torsos pinned by the cable-linked blades. Guilford recovered fast. Faster than the others. He forced distance and came in again, lance rotating sharply as he tried to control the Izanagi's movement. His wingmen circled wide, firing to restrict escape routes and pin Naruto into Guilford's charge. Naruto smiled behind the mask. Let's see if the Izanagi can really keep up. He drove more chakra into the controls. The nightmare answered beautifully. The Izanagi dropped low beneath Guilford's spear, planted a marked dagger into the Gloucester's leg armor, then teleported to it in a crimson flash. A Kodachi carved across the torso plating before Guilford could fully recover. The support Gloucesters opened fire. Naruto was already gone. He flickered between marks. Roof. Street. Wall. Enemy chassis. Every movement became harder to track as the Izanagi turned the battlefield into a web of instant repositioning points. One Gloucester lost an arm. The other had its rifle cut in half. Guilford kept pace better than the others, but even he was pushed backward. I must admit, Guilford said over open comms, voice controlled despite the pressure, you are far more capable than expected. Madara's reply was cold. And I haven't even stopped holding back yet. Guilford's eyes widened slightly. The next exchange came like a storm. The Izanagi blurred forward, one dagger reeling back into its hand while the other embedded itself behind Guilford. A palm emitter flared. Chakra surged. Guilford blocked the first slash, dodged the second, and barely twisted out of the path of a Rasengan forming against the Izanagi's open palm. Then the Izanagi teleported from the rear marker to directly in front of him. A wind-charged slash tore across the Gloucester's torso. The machine staggered. Alarms screamed inside Guilford's cockpit. His 2 support units rushed to cover him. Naruto's Mangekyo flickered again. This time Guilford saw something impossible on the feed, a brief, spiraling distortion blooming around the Izanagi's eye line as one of the support Gloucesters lunged in. Space twisted around the unit's lance. The weapon vanished from the tip backward, swallowed into nothing before the pilot could release it. The Izanagi struck next. A slash cut through the Gloucester's chest plating, forcing emergency ejection. The second support unit fired point blank. The Izanagi turned intangible for half a heartbeat. The rounds passed through the frame as if it were a ghost. Then Naruto solidified behind it and drove a Kodachi through the machine's power unit. The pilot ejected just before the Gloucester collapsed. Guilford stared at the feed, shaken despite himself. What are you? Madara's machine stood across from him, black and crimson armor glowing through the smoke. The external speaker crackled. Someone who is tired of watching Britannia bury children. For once, Guilford had no answer. A smoke screen erupted between them before he could press further. By the time it cleared, the Izanagi was gone. Its IFF signature vanished with it. Elsewhere, Lelouch's plan began to unravel all at once. The resistance pieces he had set in motion were being wiped out. Cornelia's forces had adapted faster than expected. Madara, despite causing chaos and forcing Britannia to withdraw units from several zones, had disappeared before Lelouch could properly use him. This didn't work out like Shinjuku, Lelouch muttered, gripping the controls too tightly. That's not how this was supposed to go. Then Cornelia's voice came over the open military channel. Attention all Nightmare pilots. Open your hatches and show me your faces. I repeat, all pilots, reveal yourselves. Lelouch went still. He had no answer. No path. No time. If he opened the hatch, he was exposed. If he refused, he was identified. Then a shout erupted over the comms. Zero's been sighted. The battlefield's attention shifted instantly. Lelouch's eyes widened. There, standing atop a shattered building in full view of the gathered forces, was Zero. Not him. But wearing his face well enough to steal every eye in the area. Lelouch did not waste the opportunity. He turned his stolen Sutherland and fled while the trap snapped shut on someone else. Far from the main battlefield, the Izanagi crouched in the shadow of a collapsed overpass, its systems running hot. Naruto sat inside the cockpit, breathing hard. A thin line of blood trailed from his left eye. The Sharingan spun once, twice, then faded back toward blue as the Mangekyo receded. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he saw her again. The girl with the smile. The blood. The soldiers laughing. Naruto opened his eyes sharply. The memory vanished. But the anger remained. The Kyuubi's voice was low. You killed them. Naruto stared at his trembling hands. I know. And you saved people. He was quiet. Remember both. Naruto let out a slow, uneven breath and rested one hand against the controls. Well, he murmured, that was one hell of a first run. The Kyuubi snorted. You could have skipped all of that and trusted my power from the start. Naruto gave a faint, tired smile. Maybe. But from the way the Izanagi had moved, fought, and answered him under fire, he already knew one thing with certainty. Minato had not built him a machine. He had built him an answer. And today, for better or worse, Naruto had started learning how terrifying that answer could be. Abandoning the stolen Sutherland the moment it was no longer useful, Lelouch moved quickly into the sewers beneath the Saitama ghetto. He hated retreat. Hated the taste of it. Hated what it meant. Running now was an admission, no matter how he tried to frame it otherwise. Cornelia had outplayed him on the field, and for all his planning, for all his confidence, he had been forced to turn his back and flee before he could even touch her. His steps slowed only when he saw a figure waiting ahead of him in the darkness. Zero. Or rather, the person wearing Zero's mask. Lelouch came to a stop, breathing hard, though his expression remained composed. Why did you rescue me? He asked. He already knew the answer. Or at least, he thought he did. That was why he wasn't the least bit surprised when the figure removed the mask and revealed long light green hair and golden eyes. CC tilted her head slightly. I already told you, she said. I can't have you dying. Lelouch's mouth tightened. I would not have lost if the conditions had been equal. CC. Gave him a long look. That sounds like something a sore loser would say. She turned away from him as if the argument bored her, loosely tossing the zero mask up and catching it again. If you're really as capable as you think you are, then you should be the one deciding the conditions. Lelouch's eyes narrowed. Then that's exactly what I'll do. His voice hardened with renewed resolve. I'll create the conditions myself. I'll gather a force that cannot be crushed by Britannia. A people. A nation. Do you really think it's that simple? The voice came from behind him. Lelouch spun at once. There, standing in the dim sewer tunnel with the fox mask still hiding his face, was Madara. The sight of him sent a sharp pulse of irritation through Lelouch's chest. It should have been impossible for him to get here that quickly. Then again, impossibility had never seemed to mean much to Madara. Hello, Zero, Madara said, his tone even and unreadable. Lelouch straightened slightly, though his eyes sharpened. I don't know what you're. Don't waste the lie. Madara cut him off without raising his voice. I've known who you were since the bridge. Lelouch's scowl deepened. That left only two options. Either convince Madara to work with him or eliminate the problem now. The answer came easily. Activating his Geass, Lelouch fixed his gaze directly onto the spinning red eyeholes behind the fox mask. I hereby order you, he said, his voice echoing against the damp walls, to do whatever I say. Silence followed. CC watched carefully from the side, curious despite herself. Lelouch waited for the familiar response. For the break. For the sign that the command had taken hold. It never came. Madara simply stood there. Lelouch's expression tightened. Why? Why did my Geass not work on him? Madara took one step forward, the movement slow and deliberate. Is that what you call that power? He asked. Geass. Lelouch said nothing. That alone was answer enough. Madara's head tilted slightly. It doesn't matter. Lelouch's voice sharpened. Why didn't it work? For a moment, Madara seemed to consider answering. Then he gave the smallest shake of his head. That answer belongs to me. Lelouch's hands clenched. CC, meanwhile, had gone very still. She had been studying him from the start, but now her curiosity deepened further. Madara had not known what Geass was called. He had asked honestly. Which meant he was not resisting it because of prior knowledge. And yet Lelouch's command had done nothing. That made him more dangerous than either of them had realized. Before Lelouch could press any further, Madara moved. One instant he was several steps away. The next he was standing directly in front of Lelouch. Close enough that Lelouch could clearly see the tomo spinning within the Sharingan behind the mask. Sleep, Madara said. Lelouch tried to resist it on instinct, forcing himself to stay standing, to stay aware, to reject the command the way Madara had rejected his own. It didn't matter. His strength bled away in an instant. His vision blurred. His knees gave out. And before his head could strike the concrete, Madara caught him and lowered him carefully against the wall. He stood over the unconscious prince for a moment in silence. Then, just before he turned away, Madara said quietly. Sorry, Lelouch. I never wanted to use my Sharingan on you. CC heard it. Every word. And that, more than anything else that had happened in the last few minutes, caught her attention. Not the Sharingan. Not the resistance to Geass. Not even the ease with which he had put Lelouch down. That apology. Spoken like it meant something. Spoken like this was personal. Madara turned then and finally looked toward her. CC met his gaze without flinching. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then she broke the silence first. Sharingan, she said. That's what you called it. Madara did not deny it. CC folded her arms loosely. Is that what's interfering with my ability to identify you? She asked. That's what's preventing me from seeing your face clearly, isn't it? There was the slightest stiffness in his posture. Which told her enough. Don't worry, she added, almost amused now. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I know something is affecting me, but I still can't place who you are. That seemed to relax him, if only slightly. I'm surprised you can even tell it's there, he said. Should I not be able to? No. His answer was immediate. If the genjutsu is set properly, you should never notice it at all. Genjutsu, CC. Repeated softly, filing the word away. Illusion technique. That was what it sounded like. That still answered almost nothing. She studied him for another moment. You're not like Lelouch. Obviously. I'm serious. So am I. That drew the faintest hint of a smile from her. How irritating, CC. Murmured. You're the first truly interesting variable I've seen in a long time. Madara said nothing. Inside Naruto's mind, the Kyuubi rumbled with dark amusement. She's dangerous. I know. And curious. Naruto's eyes stayed on CC. That too. The fox's voice deepened. The power around her feels similar to the boy's. Same nature. Vastly more of it. Naruto didn't look away. So you think she's connected to this Geass, Lelouch was talking about? I think she's more than connected, the Kyuubi replied. The brat was using a spark. She feels like the fire that spark came from. That matched Naruto's instincts. CC was still watching him, still measuring him, still trying to solve something. You know, she said at last, we've been standing here talking, and I still don't know what to call you beyond the name everyone else uses. A beat passed. Then Madara answered. Madara is enough. CC accepted that with a small nod. Then I suppose we'll meet again, Madara. He gave no verbal answer. But the silence itself felt like confirmation. Then, in the next instant, he was gone. CC stared at the empty tunnel for a moment longer, thoughtful now in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. Then she looked down at Lelouch. A few seconds passed. After that, she crouched beside him and pinched his cheek hard enough to drag him back toward consciousness. Lelouch jerked awake with a sharp sound of pain, one hand flying to his face. Where is he? He demanded immediately, eyes darting around the tunnel. Where is Madara? Gone, CC said simply. Lelouch's expression twisted with frustration. Did you learn anything? No. It was not technically a lie. Not enough to be useful. Not enough that she intended to share with him, even if it had been. CC stood and turned away. Come on, she said. Unless you intend to stay here and sulk. Lelouch stared after her, jaw tight. This was the second time he had crossed paths with Madara. And just like the first, the encounter had left him with more questions than answers. And with the increasingly infuriating realization that whenever Madara appeared, control of the board seemed to slip out of Lelouch's hands.